In this world, everyone has the opportunity to become a deity. Deities are divided into divine beings, demigods, true gods, chief gods, and kings of gods. Upon reaching 18 years of age, everyone gains a divine dimension and a clan core. Clans also have different levels, and people who get into strong clans become strong gods. Damian Shepherd was born into the Locust Familiar clan, one of the weakest in existence. It was into this that our hero was reborn, into a worthless loser, without connections and a future. The boy's grandfather is sure that even though his parents are missing, they are still alive, and leaves the search for them to his grandson. And a classmate decided to use his familiar as food for her Thunderbird if the guy expected to graduate from school. Damian's morning at school begins, as usual, with a conflict with Stephen Farley. The bully with his goblin familiars demands divine power from the hero, but he assures that he has no such thing. Stephen orders him to bring 1,000 points of divine power tomorrow. Otherwise, he promises to destroy his spiritual core. Damian must now find a way to rise to the top from the bottom with a huge baggage of tasks behind him. But first he decides to deal with the blonde, for which he goes to the dive capsule. He has no other choice, so he decides to at least try to fight back against Stephen. Putting on the helmet and entering the capsule, he is transported into his divine space. A moment later, instead of a sterile room with a capsule, his gaze is presented with the endless expanses of his world. In the grass, he notices locusts, his familiars, who are just waiting for his instructions. The hero decides to study his character better and opens the window of this indicator. Among the talents, he sees the skill Sacrifice, which he knows nothing about, and therefore decides to ask the system. He is called the Chosen One, which is why he will gain a new skill with each new level. It also turns out that Sacrifice allows him to exchange the lives of creatures for items of equal value once a day. While thinking about how he can defeat Stephen, he notices the reproduction rate and life cycle of his familiars. By calculating their reproduction rate, he finds a solution to his problem. And although such a decision is very risky without the right to lose, he has no choice or time to implement another one. The next day, Caroline is the first to approach Damian to ask if he has decided to become her slave and feed her familiar. In return, she promises him her protection until graduation, but Damian refuses. She reminds him that he is in danger today and advises him not to be stupid. But even in such conditions, the hero chooses to refuse her offer, because even being a weakling, he has pride. As soon as the girl leaves, having received a refusal, Stephen comes to Damian's desk and reminds him of the debt of 1,000 units of divine power. Otherwise, he threatens to destroy the core of the guy's divine space. Unexpectedly for the bully, the hero offers him to carry out the threat, and he, stunned, even steps back. For a moment, he assumes that the reason for Damian's courage is Caroline. Meanwhile, classmates are already anticipating the battle between a weakling and the heir of a powerful clan. Remembering his status, Stephen takes out a card to immerse himself in someone else's divine space. This item creates a portal between the divine worlds of opponents, allowing them to invade each other's domains. As if he were in a immersion capsule, Damian is sucked into his divine space. But suddenly, instead of the usual view of the plains, he sees a huge gate in front of him. They slowly open, revealing a whole army of Stephen's familiars. Obeying their master's orders, the goblins go into Damian's space to destroy the hero's spiritual core. Meanwhile, classmates are watching everything that is happening, praising Stephen's strength and talent. One thing they are sure of is that Damian is no longer a survivor. In response to the goblin advance, the hero orders his army of self-destructing locusts to attack back. Classmates are shocked that such elite forms of familiars, capable of self-destruction, are available to such a weakling. But even so, they are confident that the weak insects are no match for the fighting power of the goblins, even in this form. Meanwhile, the two armies are moving towards each other. Damian, confident in his superiority, smirks. Yesterday, he decided to sacrifice 2.5 billion locusts, leaving a small part to restore their numbers. As soon as the ritual was performed, the system offered the hero 3 options for the development of events. He could obtain 100,000 goblin warriors, or the ability to improve the environment of the divine space. But Damian decided that such half measures were not suitable for him, because they were either disposable or irrelevant to the situation. Instead, he decided to take the third option, the ability to give familiars the ability to self-destruct. The system handed him a huge crystal, which connected with the spiritual core of the divine space. Some of the remaining locusts underwent visible changes, and the hero immediately decided to test their abilities. Throwing one insect into a tree, Damian saw a fairly large explosion. Although such an attack would not be enough to kill the goblin, He was sure that the number of insects would also play a role. In the present day, classmates look in amazement at the smoke that fills the battlefield. When visibility clears, Stephen's army is suffering heavy losses. The hero, together with his army of locusts, boldly advances forward, pushing the enemy back. Having assessed the situation to his disadvantage, the bully orders his goblins to immediately retreat to his divine space. But Damian warns that it is too late to retreat. He then commands his familiars to invade the enemy camp. His charges rush to carry out the order with lightning speed. Stephen sees how the game has turned and admits defeat. If only Damian would remove his familiars from his world. But the hero remembers that there was no mercy towards him, and therefore he sees justice in his actions. Roughnut warns that if something happens to him, his powerful parents will cause problems for Damian. In response, the boy orders his locusts to destroy the spiritual core of Stephen's world at any cost. No tearful persuasion can convince the hero, because now he is interested not in defense, but in revenge. But suddenly a familiar voice orders him to stop. The class teacher Jameson quickly approaches the portal, demanding an explanation of what is happening. At this time, the locusts have already discovered the core of Stephen's divine world and are beginning to destroy it. The guy's astral embodiment begins to fade, and he asks the teacher for help. Jameson demands that Damian immediately recall his familiars, but he is in no hurry to carry out the order. The hero asks why the man came here in the first place. The leader hesitantly replies that it is his job as a teacher to resolve conflicts between students. But Damian recalls that he was beaten and threatened. But Jameson didn't lift a finger. And even in this situation, he is sure the teacher would not have lifted a finger if Stephen continued to win the fight. The man stutters, but Damian doesn't need an answer. He already knows it. By this time, his familiars had already completed their task, and a deafening explosion from Stephen's spiritual core thundered. With this, the gates between the divine spaces collapse, and the bully is left to mourn his defeat. The hero turns to the class teacher and earnestly asks him to leave his domain. The broadcast ends immediately, leaving the classroom in a ringing silence from the final battle. Stephen sinks to the floor in despair. Deprived of divine space, he has lost his brilliant future. Meanwhile, Mr. Jameson bursts into the classroom, but discovers that Damian has left. The man promises that he will not leave him unpunished and will definitely achieve his expulsion. The hero, left alone in his world, decides to count his losses. Most of the modified locusts, predictably, died, and the guy decides that he needs more of them in the future. As a reward for the battle, he received a fragment of the spiritual core of Stephen's space. He activates the fragment and the war-scorched land around him is transformed, expanding and becoming green again. However, he can't help but worry about Stephen's powerful parents putting pressure on the school. He also received the dwarf's hammer as a reward for his victory, which he decides to exchange for something more useful. Immediately, he receives an offer to exchange weapons for a fire crystal. This artifact increases the fire resistance and explosion power of familiars. Damian agrees to the offer without much thought, and the exchange takes place instantly. The crystal-enhanced individuals explode with greater force, and the hero realizes that he now possesses living grenades. At this time, Stephen's parents burst into the head teacher's office to deal with the student who took away their son's future. Within a few hours, she calls Damian to report the problem. She immediately begins to tell the story of Stephen's parents, who visited her. They had only one goal in mind, to get their son's abuser expelled from school. The headmistress boldly replied that it was Stephen who had started the conflict, and that the battle had taken place on fair terms. And since their son was the first to attack, there can be no question of expelling the victim. Finally, Mr. Farley suggested sending an army to attack the hero's divine space. The headmistress apologizes, as the school's authority ends there. She only hopes that Damian can withstand such an attack. The guy thanks her for the warning and replies that he is ready to accept this test. He has very little time left, and the hero decides to make a second sacrifice. By this time, the locusts had multiplied enough for him to sacrifice billions of them a second time. The power of the ritual shakes the lands around, and a pillar of energy strikes the sky. After this, everything calms down, and a sign appears in front of Damian with a choice of reward for the ritual. The first options offer artifacts in exchange, but the guy decides to take the third path, to summon a hero. Grey Fang from the Sword Swing clan immediately appears in front of him. The hero's incarnation immediately demands that Damian give him a weapon for himself. At this point, the guy has 54 points of divine power, and he decides to open the tab with divine weapons. He chooses a weapon of medium strength that contains a special effect. Having received the weapon, Grey Fang immediately tries it out in action. Pleased with the result, he announces that he needs 3 more of these to fully reveal his power. Damian is shocked, because even on this sword he spent everything he had saved up to this point. However, he has a battle ahead of him with Farley's army, and therefore he cannot afford to make any mistakes. At this time, Caroline is busy cultivating in her divine space, surrounded by her familiars. But suddenly her meditation is interrupted by memories. As a child, when she almost drowned, a boy with white hair came to her aid. Remembering her debt to him, she thinks about her family's possibilities and how she could help Damian. Suddenly, she is pulled out of her thoughts by a call from him. She decides that he has changed his mind about her offer to be a slave, but the guy just wants to borrow her divine energy points. Caroline asks what she gets out of the deal, clearly unimpressed by his victory over Stephen and the empowered locusts. Damian decides not to waste any more of his time on her and says goodbye, taking her by surprise. As soon as the call ends, the girl regrets her rude words. Caroline decides to try again and calls him, announcing that she will give him divine energy points. In the end, Greyfang is given a sword in each hand. Damian only hopes that the hero will live up to his expectations. The next day, when he shows up in class, everyone is shocked by his boldness and recklessness. The guy just grins. Everyone is waiting for him to lose, but he doesn't intend to give up so quickly. Even Caroline advises him not to waste her resources in vain, because even against part of Farley's army, in her opinion, he will not be able to stand up. Damian waves it off since he essentially has no chance of avoiding this skirmish. But the girl is sure that if he becomes her slave, her family's protection will be enough to resist the Farley family. The hero turns away and asks her not to interfere with his preparations for battle, although he thanks her for her concern. Her favor towards him does not go unnoticed, and some of his classmates begin to root for his defeat. A couple of minutes later, an unusually happy teacher brings Stephen's parents into the classroom. Without a trace of regret, he points at Damian. Mrs. Farley does not hold back in her expressions and promises that she will make the hero pay. Mr. Jameson calls the boy to him, but he announces that he will wait for the headmistress so that she can witness what is happening. The class teacher is rushing him because he thinks that the head teacher doesn't have time for such insignificant matters. But unexpectedly for him, Mrs. Weber appears in the office, demanding an explanation for his behavior. He assures her that he is simply teaching an impudent student, but the perceptive head teacher asks him not to pretend to be Farley's servant. Stephen's parents are not at all embarrassed by her appearance, and the father of the family suggests that they start as soon as possible. He takes out a card and begins to dive into divine space. As soon as Damian finds himself in his world, he sees a familiar portal and thousands of eyes shimmering from the darkness. Growling and baring their teeth, wolf familiars emerge from the portal. The entire army of wolves is very strong, and their leader is developed to incredible heights. Classmates are sure that this time Damian is definitely finished. The motley army approaches the hero and stops, awaiting a command from Mr. Farley. He is serious about taking revenge for the destruction of his son's spiritual core. Caroline points out that the man promised to send 1,000 fighters, but sent 2,000, and this is an obvious scam. Meanwhile, the battle begins, and the wolf army rushes forward, but they are met by 7 million locusts. The audience is amazed that Damian was able to develop such an army from a handful of remaining individuals in just one day. But, unfortunately, the hero did not have time to develop them, and therefore their attacks do practically no damage to the wolves. Even Jameson acknowledges the guy's talent, but agrees that he tried to jump above his head this time. But suddenly something strange happens that pulls him away from savoring his victory. Clouds gather over the battlefield, blocking out the light. It turns out to be a sneak attack, and a rain of exploding locusts falls on the wolf army. This time, they not only explode, but also leave behind magma that continues to damage the enemy. But Mr. Farley isn't about to lose to some schoolboy. He commands his familiars to activate their hidden powers. The next moment, streams of icy breath burst from the wolves' mouths. Together, they create a barrier that protects them from the effects of magma and explosions. In addition, Damian only has 500,000 specimens left in his arsenal, and his students are certain that he is now finished. Mr. Farley is already reveling in his victory and sending his familiars to crush the guy's spiritual core. The same one surprisingly calmly watches the wolves rushing past without even stopping them. The director also sees no way for Damian to win and leaves. But suddenly Caroline notices something unusual near Damian's spiritual core. The wolves also stop when they are met there by a tall figure with 4 arms. The students recognize the swords that Greyfang wields and are amazed not only by his wealth but also by the unusualness of the character. Mrs. Weber immediately recognizes a member of the Sword Swing clan, who are born with an unusual physical form. But Farley's army also has equally strong characters, and so the students are confident that Greyfang will not stand against them. The woman also notes that the character does not look like an enhanced version, but rather like the original character. Mr. Farley spent his whole life trying to summon one original hero, and before him, a schoolboy just did it. He orders his familiars to destroy the core at all costs, as this will give him the heroic form of Grey Fang. The old man with 4 arms only smirked in response to this. Breaking away from his place, he cuts them out in a split second, moving between enemies like the wind. Grey Fang deftly wields 4 swords as if they were one and advances forward, cutting the wolves to pieces. The leader of Farley's army is enraged by this situation and activates his icy breath again. The heroic character also falls under the influence of the icy breath, freezing to the ground. The captain of the enemy army decides to take advantage of this opportunity and sends several wolves to attack him. Grey Fang, remaining in place, raises his swords above his head, concentrating a ball of energy between them. He then directs this energy into the leader of the wolves, causing a powerful explosion. Thus, one of Mr. Farley's most powerful familiars was reduced to a pile of separate limbs. Feeling his defeat approaching, he orders his army to move forward. But suddenly the further battle is interrupted by Director Birch. He reminds Mr. Farley of their agreement. The man does not dare to anger the director and orders his familiars to stop. The director glances at the divine space and Damian's fighting force, admitting that he is impressed. At this point, the competition ends and everyone returns to the real world. The hero wastes no time and asks to be translated. His request greatly surprises the class teacher, and he asks the student not to make hasty decisions. The man assures that he will provide Damian with enough materials for normal education. But in reality, he is just thinking about his own benefit, because such talent will definitely give him an excellent reputation. But the guy still insists on moving to another class. Unfortunately, the head teacher says that it is not possible to simply change classes at will. However, she suggests that he take a re-exam to prove that he needs to change classes. Full of determination, Damian agrees to this condition. But unexpectedly, Caroline also asks to participate in this testing. Mr. Jameson can barely contain his rage and asks her to tell him personally about any shortcomings in her training. But the girl refuses to give him a reason because she simply wants to leave her current team. Following her, another student raises his hand, also wanting to take the test. At this point, Jameson can't take it anymore because the class monitor can't just leave the class. But Edgar Howell has already decided he is going to follow Caroline everywhere because he loves her very much. Mrs. Weber announces that she will prepare everything for testing and invites the class teacher to talk privately. Soon school hours are over and Caroline catches up with Damian on the street. She's extremely curious about how he got his heroic Grey Fang form, and since she helped the guy, she demands answers. Unfortunately for her, Damian merely brushes off the questions and transports himself to his dimension. Having assessed the losses, the hero decides that with such insignificant fighting forces, tomorrow will be difficult for him. Grey Fang also comes down to him to tell him about the wolf familiars that hid in the mines. Damian decides that simply killing them would be a waste of resources, even if they remain a threat to him. Instead of a simple cleanup, he asks the hero to capture the wolves and bring them outside, but only alive. After about 2 hours, all of Farley's familiars appear before the boy, tied up and ready for their fate. Damian decides to perform a sacrificial ritual with them, adding a few locusts as well. Ultimately, the system offers him 3 reward options to choose from: a huge robot, a forge, and an observation tower. The hero decides that none of the proposed options will be useful to him, simply because of the size and strength of his familiars. But suddenly he remembers the goblins that remained in this space after Stephen's defeat. To quickly find them, he activates the Eye of God. Immediately before his eyes appear goblins who are working hard and building something. After the battle, Damian ordered them to take up mining and construction, and the goblins proved to be very successful in this. The guy even felt sorry that Stephen used them without paying attention to their talents. Observing these creatures solves the dilemma. The guy gives them a forge so that they can create better weapons. Meanwhile, Jameson called a meeting of all teachers to discuss his situation. Unexpectedly for him, some teachers are happy to have such talented students in their class. In response to this, he reminds us of the students' lack of respect for the teacher's authority, and therefore demands that the test be made more difficult. His speech proves convincing, and many teachers decide to support his idea. The next day, Jameson hands Damian, Caroline, and Edgar their assignments. Classmates are given the task of fighting 1,000 opponents, which corresponds to the 2nd level of difficulty. But unlike them, the hero gets a task of the 10th difficulty level, to defeat 10,000 opponents. Upon hearing this, The head teacher asks Jameson to review Damian's assignment, but he brushes it off, since all the teachers have agreed on the assignments. And the guy himself is not against such difficulty because he sees it as a chance to prove his abilities. The class teacher can only mutter insults behind his back, mistaking his confidence for pomposity. Caroline seizes the opportunity and once again reminds Damian of the possibility of becoming her slave in exchange for protection. He politely refuses, and Edgar only looks at the girl enviously because he wants her to pay the same amount of attention to him. Soon the testing begins and armies of red goblins fill the children's divine worlds. Classmates agree that they have never seen such a difficult task, but they blame Damian himself for it. He, holding back his rage, looks at the army of enemies who are also resistant to fire and calls Jameson a coward. The man advises the student to blame only himself for this and looks forward to the goblins destroying the core of his world. Meanwhile, other teachers congratulate him on the successful implementation of his plan. Only Mrs. Weber sympathizes with Damian and hopes that he will find a way out of the situation. When the red goblins are close enough, the hero sends his exploding locust towards them. In response, the enemies activate fireballs and throw them at the insects. The boy watches with a dejected look as his familiars are destroyed. As a second wave of defense, he sends out exploding locusts. Such countermeasures already have at least some effect, and several hundred goblins die in explosions. Meanwhile, Edgar and Caroline have already completed the mission and are leaving the dive capsules. Weber tells them about the difficulties Damian is facing and suspects that things will only get worse. Wave after wave, he sends new groups of exploding locusts forward. They are certainly having success, but not enough to hold off all the attackers. The red goblins push forward and soon find themselves dangerously close to the core of the world. Although Damian destroyed many goblins, Greyfang was responsible for destroying the majority of their army. The head teacher contacts the boy and suggests that he give up and try to pass the test another time. But the hero refuses, intending to fight until his last breath for the right to move to another class. Meanwhile, Greyfang fights off the goblin with swings of 4 swords, protecting the core of space. Eventually, the goblins decide to resort to a familiar tactic and attack him with fireballs. Finding himself in a situation where he cannot avoid damage, Greyfang comes under direct enemy fire. Jameson is already reveling in his victory, enjoying the triumph of what he believes to be justice. But suddenly his euphoria is interrupted by another teacher, surprised by what is happening on the screen. To everyone's surprise, Farley's goblin familiars, who remained there after the battle, appear on the battlefield. They boldly rush into battle, protecting the spiritual core of this world. The students also recognize the Furley goblins and realize that Damian is not as simple as they thought. Within a couple of minutes, the army of red goblins is completely defeated. Weber and Caroline cannot contain their joy for the hero's victory. Jameson, on the contrary, is gritting his teeth in rage because his plan has completely failed. When Edgar, Caroline, and Damian appear in front of the teachers, they immediately offer them to join their classes. There's an interesting dynamic emerging where Caroline is willing to go after Damian, and Edgar is willing to go after the girl. But the hero first asks the head teacher why he was given such a difficult task. The woman does not hide the truth. The assignments were compiled and distributed by a meeting of teachers. She also provides a report on the progress of the meeting, including a list of those who voted to assign Damian such a task. The teachers immediately regret their decision to support Jameson, because now the boy will definitely not choose their class. After checking the report, the hero finds out that only 2 teachers were honest and fair. Mr. Cole offers him to join his class in exchange for an army of 10,000 goblins. Mr. Houston suggests focusing on familiars and promises to help develop Damian's locusts. It is he who bribes the hero with his offer. And along with this, Edgar and Caroline ask to join his class. In gratitude for their decision, the man gives them improvements for their divine worlds. The hero gets a second-level hive, which significantly increases the speed of locust reproduction. Meanwhile, the head teacher attracts everyone's attention with a reminder about the exams, according to which resources will be distributed between classes. After classes, Damian immerses himself in his divine space to assess his capabilities. Looking at his meager fighting force, he realizes that he will be in last place unless he does something. He also notices that the name of the goblins has changed to Goblin Blacksmiths and decides to visit them himself. It turns out they have evolved due to the battle and have become elite units that can be upgraded. Damian spends 4 days in the development of the world and its inhabitants. When Damian deems there are enough locusts, he sacrifices them to gain a bonus for his world. The familiar window with reward options immediately appears. The first option is the gluttony skill. The other options are just as strong. but the ability to gain energy by eating enemies is impressive. Therefore, Damian decides to choose gluttony. Just a few days later, when the boy visits the divine space, he is met by an evolved form of locust. Huge specimens over a meter long and capable of exploding will certainly be useful in passing the exam. On the day of the test, Caroline approaches Damian again because she is sure that his familiars are not strong enough. Meanwhile, Edgar watches their squabble. He is angry at Damian for making the girl be interested only in him. Mr. Houston is at the board explaining the importance of the exam to the entire class and talking about individual awards from him. He also talks about the two stages of the exam, screening and rating. Those who fail the first stage will be completely expelled from the school, but those who pass the second stage will be able to compete for prizes. The rewards are substantial enough to make Damian's eyes sparkle with excitement. Soon the teacher announces the start of the exam, and the hero is sucked into the portal. He has already prepared his goblins and locusts for battle, and is gathering them all at the portal, preparing to welcome the guests. From there come out demonic dolls made of flesh and blood, similar to Godzilla. Damian knows it won't be easy. Although these creatures are base level, they are much stronger than elite forms, and also have good defense. But he is confident that even with such opponents, his explosive locusts will cope, so he sends them forward. Due to the attack of familiars, most of the demonic dolls are destroyed by fire and magma. Damian watches their destruction with satisfaction and decides that their charred bodies will make good food for the locusts. To do this, he sends goblins ahead to collect the bodies of the enemies. After a short time, the locusts absorb the monsters' bodies in a matter of minutes, saturating themselves with energy. At this time, teachers discuss how many students were expelled because they did not pass the first stage. Mr. Houston can't get enough of his new student, who not only won, but also turned his enemies into a resource. He is very surprised that there are familiars that are immune to the toxins in the bodies of demonic dolls. For the other teachers, this becomes a revelation, and they decide to study this field in more detail in the future. Disappointed with the current situation, Jameson assures them that it was just luck and that the locusts are still useless in combat. Houston stands up for his student, confident that Damian's familiars are no longer weak. He also considered the locusts useless, but it was obvious to everyone that the guy had brought the form of these creatures to an elite level. His words do not convince Jameson, because in his opinion, locusts will always be weaker than goblin familiars. Houston asks him not to compare two different familiars, in response to which his colleague suggests judging by the results of the exam. He even offers to bet 5 points of divine energy on Damian's fate in the second stage of the exam. Jameson keeps quiet about the fact that his nephew is among the participants, and he will certainly overtake the incompetent without the necessary resources. The system sums up: 430 candidates pass the first stage, but only 300 make it to the second. It turns out that when it came time to form the rankings, 130 students simply decided not to participate. Soon the rating stage begins and skeletons enter the students' divine spaces through a huge portal. Even the teachers themselves are shocked that such weak creatures came out against the students at this stage. Damian laughs, as these enemies are usually just used to weaken the enemy. But now they will simply become food for his army of locusts. Here, a huge army of insects covers the sky. Looking at the reaction of the simple skeletons, the hero only sympathizes with the students who were scared and decided not to continue the fight. The battle is over in just a couple of hours. It turns out that pitting weaklings against weaklings is a rather time-consuming endeavor. After the announcement of his victory in the battle, the second stage of the skeleton's attack begins, among which several elite forms are noticeable. Against them, Damian uses exploding locusts and regular ones, using their synergy to win. In just a few moments, the army of skeletons will drown in magma, which will significantly slow them down and destroy them not far from the portal. The hero decides to take advantage of their weakness and orders the red goblins to pour more magma from the huge forge onto the ground. Thanks to this, the skeletons burn in the magma before they even set foot on the ground of the divine space. Mr. Houston makes no secret of his pride in his student, while the other teachers are shocked and annoyed. Mr. Jameson reminds that the 7th wave has just ended, and his student has also already defeated the skeletons. In the divine space of his nephew, Brendan, there is a powerful line of defense and attack. It is obvious that his uncle has invested a lot of money and resources into his development and promotion. Caroline's space also has structures, but her familiars are naturally elite forms. Even the teachers don't have creatures as strong as her, so she is also placed at the top of the rankings. After 10 waves of attacks, only 18 students, including our heroes, successfully repel them. The system warns that the next wave of attack will be different from the previous ones. This time, it is not a simple enemy that invades the student's space, but a heroic skeletal form. The Bone Collector, while lacking in combat power, has very useful abilities. This character is able to manipulate bones and fuse them. Just a moment after its appearance, the remains of deceased skeletons and broken bones begin to form into something huge. Commanding his creation with dark energy, the Bone Collector commands it to attack. Immediately, a giant skeleton, assembled from other people's bones, rushes to attack. Less than 3 minutes pass, and 8 out of 18 participants are already eliminated from the competition. But Jameson can't tear his attention away from Damian and towards his favorite. The hero obviously has a smaller opponent than everyone else. One small skeleton grabbed onto a rock and tried to escape from the battlefield. Mr. Houston explains that it was all because of the magma, which burned the bones of most of the skeletons, and therefore the collector was powerless. Thus, Damian becomes the first student, among the remaining 10, to win the 11th round. Mr. Jameson can no longer contain his anger and accuses the hero of cheating and knowing about the enemy in advance. Houston stands up for his student, but Jameson, offended by his defeat, threatens to complain to the ministry about him too. The man is sure that Damian would not have had a chance if he had not known about the appearance of the Bone Collector. He therefore promises to insist that an investigation be carried out into the fairness of the exam results. Mrs. Weber intervenes in their argument and explains that the exam questions were chosen and written by the headmaster. Besides, even she didn't know the details of the exams. Jameson immediately stops blaming the authorities but still insists on cheating. The head teacher insists that this is fiction and that Damian's assessments are completely fair. Besides, she is sure that all the help Jameson gives to his nephew and the power of Caroline's family can also be considered foul play. Houston is offended that his colleague promoted his relative, but is glad that he shot himself in the foot with the argument. At the same time, Brendan, left alone against a huge skeleton, is forced to admit his defeat and leave the competition. Houston reminds that now, according to the agreement, Jameson owes him 5 points of divine energy. With a heavy heart, the man gives up his energy, but assures her that he will soon take it back by winning another argument. An hour later, after the 13th stage of the attack, Damian and 2 others remain in the battle. Edgar leaves the 14th stage, left without the means to fight. Caroline is forced to surrender after the 16th stage when the skeletons completely destroyed her army and structures. Thus, Damian takes first place, remaining until the 20th stage. He continues to kill all subsequent skeletons with exploding locusts. Also, in the fight against stronger enemies, Greyfang certainly helps him. After 15 minutes, the system warns about the beginning of the next stage and notifies that now everything will be even more difficult. After this warning, the portal grows significantly larger, emitting lightning. Damian realizes that the next opponent will be much larger than the previous ones. The temperature begins to drop significantly, and a huge throne appears from the portal, on which a woman sits. The teachers in the observation room are stunned by the appearance of the Skeleton Lord. Damian doesn't even have creatures of that level, so he wisely decides to end the competition at this stage. After this, the portal begins to close, sucking the throne into itself. In a last attempt to stay in this divine space, the Skeleton Lord clings to the stone portal. She even attacks by throwing a huge bone towards Damian. It flies past the hero and, upon touching the ground, explodes with a deafening roar. Only then does she release the portal gate, allowing it to close. Immediately, a strong whirlpool sucks the guy in, returning him to reality. He is very surprised to learn that he was the only one who made it this far and won first place. Mr. Jameson can barely contain his rage as his favorite's first place was snatched right out of his hands. After the results were announced, many students clutched their heads. They knew that they would now be expelled as the least successful. As a reward for first place and success in advancing through the difficulty of the task, Damian receives many development cards for his space. But now, the hero must choose the best options for exchanging these cards so that his space can prosper. Luckily, the teacher agrees to help him. Through their joint work, the divine space expands, the core level rises, and the construction of the temple is completed. Damian only gets one weapon card, so he decides to go with the dwarves this time. One of the exchange options is a warhammer, but it has a condition. You need a fiery, heroic character. Now the hero just has to wait for the goblins to evolve so that they can use this weapon. An hour after the exam, Mr. Houston congratulates all the students who passed the exam and stayed at school. After this, he invites the best students to the board to award them special prizes. Damian is rewarded with the ability to choose any resource from the class treasury. Immediately before him appears a list of the most useful items that are in the possession of the class. Among all the improvements, the hero stops at the Fountain of Life. This structure makes it possible to improve space. Houston gives him a look filled with pride, happy that his student is making such wise decisions. Suddenly, during a break, Brendan approaches Damian and offers to sell him his divinity. Despite the guy's wariness, Brendan assures him that he is ready to pay him more money than he could ever dream of. Ignoring the persuasion, Damian refuses to give up his reward for this money. But he himself is interrupted by a message coming to his phone. It turns out to be an offer from Caroline, who offers to pay much more than Brendan is offering. The hero is genuinely surprised at how easily she throws away millions. The girl responds by assuring that 1 point of divinity cannot cost less than 100 million. It turns out that the divinity that the guy was awarded is even more valuable because it combines the powers of many gods, not just one. Damian realizes that Brendan was obviously trying to cheat him in this deal. Admitting his defeat, the guy walks away, but promises that the hero will soon regret his decision. Damian successfully sells Caroline's divinity point and is immediately credited with 150 million. After this, he decides to visit his divine space, where the construction of the temple has already been completed. The hero decided to build a fountain of life in the desert. According to his plan, the land there would soon become fertile. The red goblins are amazed by the wonderful gift of their god, the Warhammer. Damian chose the strongest among them and rewarded him with an unusual seed so that he would develop and become worthy of such a weapon. The goblins were extremely grateful for 2 gifts, and their faith in Damian grew thanks to this. After all these innovations, the poison mist bead remained in his hand, the benefits of which the teacher had not mentioned. Fortunately, Mr. Houston decided to call him at that very moment. He happily reports his victory in the dispute with Jameson, to which the guy congratulates him, still perplexed. But it turns out that the class teacher decided to thank the student because he played a significant role in the outcome of the dispute. In one hand, the teacher held a card with divine energy, and in the other, a demonic egg. If Damian's locust eats this egg, they will evolve into a divine demon form. Houston reminds that he promised to help develop the hero's familiars, and this egg is the only effective method. The guy isn't taken seriously because of the weakness of his familiars. But with this egg, his locusts are comparable to Caroline's familiars. Mr. Houston offers the hero to choose his reward and he settles on the demon egg. The teacher advises him to connect the bead with the divine core, and Damian thanks him in return for his valuable advice. But before ending the call, the hero decides to ask the man where he can find a lot of meat of any quality. Houston immediately rejects the idea of buying it from a store because of the price, but he tells about the demon abyss. According to him, the director recently carried out a cleanup there, and there should be a lot of monster corpses for the locusts. After the call ends, Damian is still concerned about how he will feed the locusts he continues to develop. He quickly finds an ancient tree, under which he places the demon egg to charge it with energy. After just a few days, Damian notices with satisfaction that the locusts have already swallowed the egg and have begun to produce new offspring. Right before his eyes, the egg begins to crack with a new look. A few minutes later, a specimen of the heavenly demonic insect appears from there, several hundred times stronger than the usual one. Unfortunately, the system does not provide any information on their reproduction. However, the hero has in his hands a way to create such creatures. He already notices the growth of the insect in front of him, which means the effect of gluttony affects them too. Damian decides that now is the perfect time to activate the poison mist bead. Immediately after activating the bead, the insect evolves to its elite form. At this time, Director Birch does not look even partially as pleased as Damian. After 4 years of fighting in the divine space, he still hadn't figured out how to get rid of the mountain of corpses of the monsters he had killed. But suddenly he receives a call from one of the teachers. In addition, he is very surprised by Mr. Houston's speech. He conveys the student's request to buy the corpses of monsters from him. The teacher explains that Damian would like to feed these remains to his familiars, and that this would not be the first time he has done this. The boy's name reminds the director of the situation with the demigod a couple of days ago, and he regrets that it is impossible to release the locusts directly into the abyss. However, he happily sends the map with 1,000,000 corpses on it to Houston and assures him that no payment is required. The next day, the teacher calls the principal again and offers to establish a permanent supply of corpses, surprising him. The teacher apologizes for his student and his impudence, but the principal asks him not to rush to conclusions. Instead of refusing, Mr. Birch offers a deal. For every 100 monster corpses, pay 10,000 divine power. Within 5 minutes, Houston returns with a positive response to the proposal. A few days later, in Damian's divine space, the number of locusts reaches its limit. That is why he decides to sacrifice 12 billion elite individuals. Following this, A table of possible rewards for this sacrifice appears in front of the hero. Damian is very excited about the first option, 5 elite-level giants that he is considering selling. The second option sounds just as promising, but the skill crystal simply won't connect with its undeveloped core. With his goal in mind, Damian decides to choose the third option, the disintegration mechanism. A huge machine immediately appears in front of him. Now he will be able to obtain energy crystals for the development of magical creatures. The hero decides to test the machine and fills it with iron ore to turn it into crystals. After just 5 hours, he receives 3 iron crystals, which are usually used in the creation of equipment. But each of them also costs 5 points of divine energy, which can be used to make money in the long term. Suddenly, the temple that Damian recently built transmits the prayer of the goblins because something attacked them in the mine. The hero immediately asks himself the question, how did monsters appear in his divine space? Meanwhile, the red goblins are having a hard time holding back the onslaught of the dead. The heroic form with the hammer is just fighting ahead of everyone when Damian approaches them. The energy of the skeletons reminds him of what he felt during the 21st stage of the exams. To confirm his suspicions, the hero asks to show information about the monsters. But, to his disappointment, the system refuses. The monsters are not his followers, and therefore the information is classified. Left with no options, the boy summons the heroic form of Greyfang to help fight off the skeleton's attack. A moment after appearing, the character destroys monsters with one blow. But the remains are immediately activated and reassemble into monsters. No matter how much Greyfang smashes them, the monsters recover in the blink of an eye. Therefore, Damian takes the opportunity to convince the monster to submit and accept him as his god. But the skeleton does not want to obey and attacks the divine projection of the hero with its claws. The guy just grins in response to this. As long as the divine core is intact, he is not in danger. Unlike the monsters, Damian orders the goblins and Greyfang to continue destroying them until they give up. The success of this tactic is evident 3 days later, when an army of skeletons comes to beg the hero for mercy, accepting him as their god. Now the system reveals information to him about the monsters, and they turn out to be a form of the Lord, incapable of reproduction. After spending the entire night upgrading skeletons, Damian barely makes it to class. The teacher is just announcing the start of a new exam. Based on the results of this test, they will judge which academy the student will be accepted into. Damian remembers his grandfather's instructions before he died and that he needed to enroll in the Imperial Academy. This time, the students compete in the Demon Abyss, but Houston refuses to give more details before the exam begins. The students are worried, because not many familiars can survive in that dimension. But Edgar seems inspired. Suddenly, he receives a call from an unknown number, and the guy decides to go out into the corridor to answer the call. It turns out that his former teacher, Jameson, is bothering him with a request to help get rid of one student. He even offers him a reward for this and an advance payment that will help him succeed in the exam. The prepayment turns out to be a card of a dragon demon, which is comparable in strength to a heroic character. Within an hour, all the students are transported to the Abyss. Immediately, a list of tasks with the laws of this world appears in front of each of them. First of all, in order to interact with the objects here, Damian will have to choose a character to incarnate into. Of all the options available to him, the only one capable of success is incarnation as an undead. Having chosen the right option, Damian turns into a skeleton the next second. Instead of discomfort, he felt the evil energy around him making him feel like a fish in water. As an experiment, he decided to try summoning locusts. The summoning only works once a day for participants. Unfortunately for him, within the next hour, 97 locusts were rendered ineffective. Only 3 who had been infected with evil energy beforehand were able to survive. Usually, such creatures cannot be controlled, but the locust is mindless, and therefore will remain loyal to the hero even in this state. Looking around, he chose the task that could be completed the fastest with such a small number of allies. Having reached the garden with demonic fruits, he commands his familiars to collect all the harvest from the trees. But suddenly, dead people in varying degrees of decomposition begin to rise from underground. Damian just wanted to test the power of the Skeleton Lord, and so he boldly goes to meet the monsters. After 10 minutes, all enemies are defeated. At this time, his locusts are working tirelessly, collecting fruits, and the hero asks them not to stop while there is something on the trees. This task takes the insects a whole day, but now one of the tasks without him is now impossible to complete without Damian. He decides to act cunningly, offering the students an exchange of fruits for other valuable items. Some call it cheating, while others offer real money in exchange, earning the teacher's condemnation. It turns out that only resources that participants have found in this dimension can be traded and exchanged. At this moment, Edgar is watching the chat, ready to track down his #1 enemy, Damian. The hero, meanwhile, realizes that his superiority will not last forever and decides to take action. But suddenly, skeletons began to approach him. Damian understands that the monsters were drawing energy from the fruits. However, to their disappointment when they arrived, all the trees were fruitless. The monsters were clearly not happy with this development, since their survival depended on the demonic fruits. Despite their irritated attitude, Damian decided to approach them to try to subdue them. Skeletons will be very useful in this space, and taming has a chance of success due to the Lord's aura. As expected, when a much stronger brother appears, the monsters fall prostrate before him, recognizing him as their leader. Even Damian himself is surprised by the fact that he essentially didn't have to do anything. Now he has a whole squad of skeletons under his command, but he is not going to stop and decides to head to their camp. An hour later, the hero also has skeleton knights and a demonic wolf at his disposal. One of the skeletons admits that they were weakened by the golem raids, and that is why they were forced to go for fruits. Damian realizes that he really should strengthen his army. The next day, he falls from 18th place in the rankings to 179th and decides it's time to act. After summoning a new batch of locusts and some items, he decides to give the skeleton knight a bone crystal. After being influenced by this crystal, even simple skeletons became much stronger and tougher. After distributing weapons and other useful resources among them, Damian sends them to the golem's lair. The difference between the enemy army and his turns out to be too significant, and so he decides to lure them out little by little. To do this, he sends one of the skeletons forward. As the guy had expected, a dozen enemies immediately ran out of the golem cave. On Damian's orders, the skeleton escapes and leads them straight to his army. Of course, they clearly don't expect a catch when reinforced skeletons start attacking them. Meanwhile, the hero reasons that defeated enemies can be revived and used in his own army. An hour later, his army numbers more than 7,000 warriors, and Damian decides that it is time to stop luring out the enemies. Instead, he commands his army to attack the cave. An hour later, the skeletons bring him the extracted heart crystal. Thanks to this operation, the guy gets 60 points. His rating, thanks to his wise decisions, begins to improve rapidly. At this time, Edgar, having taken the form of a demonic dragon, decided to collect fruits for the task, but found only locust eggs. Opening the list of participants, he discovered that the hero had also begun to rapidly rise in the rankings. After evaluating the information from the task list and the number of points, Edgar calculates where Damian is now. Soon, he arrives at a cave around which skeletons have gathered. Edgar understands that this is his rival's army and is not going to give them a chance to gain an advantage. And for this, he sends demonic wolves ahead. They, being in the abyss, have already developed to the elite level. The attack is so unexpected that Damian doesn't even have time to react. The skeletons immediately react and rush to defend their lord. Edgar is angry that Damian has already acquired such an army of skeletons in just 2 days. That is why he is determined to leave no trace of the hero. The next moment, he turns into a huge demonic dragon and rushes to attack. Even the strength of a skeleton knight is not enough to withstand such an opponent. Damian already recognized the one who attacked him, but it is a mystery to him why Edgar suddenly attacked. He simply replies that he doesn't like the hero's presence in the class, and therefore he wants to get rid of him. Edgar, in his dragon form, attacks him with his tail. This blow completely shatters the skeleton that Damian has become. After the victory, believing that he has dealt with his opponent, the dragon flies away, leaving the army of skeletons practically untouched. They cannot contain their anger and grief, because even in such a short time they have completely believed in their lord. Unexpectedly, due to the skeleton's ability to revive and their faith, Damian restores his body. The skeletons look at him in disbelief, while the guy orders everyone to get out of this place immediately. The hero understands that he should go on the run for the sake of his own success, but promises himself to get even with Edgar. Meanwhile, he waits in vain for Damian's name to appear among the eliminated participants. But suddenly he finds him among the first hundreds of participants and realizes that the guy still survived. Edgar, consumed by rage, decides to finish what he started and rushes back to the cave to kill both Damian and all the skeletons. To his disappointment, when he arrived at the place, he was met only by silence. Instead of giving up, he sends the demon wolves to search for Damian and the skeletons. At this time, being 50 kilometers from the cave, the hero decides to strengthen the skeletons with a crystal. After absorbing the energy of the bone crystal, they not only recover but also evolve. Looking at his place in the rankings with disappointment, Damian decides to start completing tasks again. Among the tasks he sees is one to clear out the lair of fallen demons. Deciding that this would not only be an opportunity to earn points but also to feed the familiars, he orders the army to move out. After 2 months of observing students, teachers can already see who can secure top spots in the rankings. But when the conversation turns to Damian, who is not visible among them, Jameson once again emphasizes that the student cheated. The teacher is sure that this student is a waste of space and recommends that everyone forget about him. Mr. Houston decides to stand up for his ward and again offers a bet to his colleague. He offers a bet of 10 divinity points, but Jameson, with no way to reciprocate, offers another bet. The man bets divine healing against 10 points of divinity, which means Damian won't take first place. Houston accepts the offer, but warns that his student is already on his way to completing one of the most difficult tasks. By this time, the demon population in the Abyss had dropped from 1 million to 100,000. Damian's strategy was successful, and now his army consists of as many as 900,000 skeletons. The time comes to rise in the rankings, and the hero sends his entire army to attack the camp of fallen demons. The demons tried to resist, but the sheer numbers and strength of the skeletons did not give them a single chance. Despite the merciful offer to surrender, the creatures are clearly not in the mood for conversation. In just 20 minutes, the cleanup task was completely completed. 3 skeleton knights joined forces to bolster their army. But unexpectedly, due to their incredible power, they resurrect not simple soldiers but the skeleton resurrectionist. What is also surprising is that this character is stronger than the knights, and even increases the level of faith in Damian. Immediately, the resurrector extends his bony hand to the broken remains of the soldiers from the hero's army. Unexpectedly, they begin to recover, reducing losses in battle to 0. In addition, Damian receives trophies as a reward, among which is a source of the fallen, which will allow the locust to survive here. Now nothing will stop the hero from defeating Edgar. For the task he gets as many as 80 points, but his position in the ranking is just as dismal. Damian decides not to delay and orders his army to move forward to carry out the next task. In just a couple of days, the hero rises from 400th place to 4th, completing the most difficult missions. Jameson advises Houston not to get too excited, as winning the bet requires first place. Suddenly, the intercom announced that several academies had sent Damian invitations to study. Mr. Jameson is infuriated by this special treatment, but it turns out that no other invitations were received. In order for the academy to express interest, a number of conditions must be met, which only Damian has met so far. A moment later, the system reports about Caroline, who also fulfilled the conditions and received invitations from the academies. Jameson decides not to delay and reminds Edgar of their agreement and orders the guy to complete difficult tasks, ahead of the hero. Meanwhile, Damian evaluates the most challenging and rewarding missions of all. He needs 130 points to get first place, for which he needs to complete 2 difficult tasks. The first thing he decides to do is take on the task of destroying the tribe of Minotaurs. At the same time, Edgar, in the form of a dragon, and Brendan, in the form of a liger, fight together to defeat the Minotaurs. But they are clearly inferior to the heroic form of the Minotaur wielding a stone bat. The combined strength of the dragon and the liger should be enough to defeat such an opponent, but the two fail. An hour later, not a wet spot remains of their armies, thanks to just one Minotaur. The disciples realize that they don't have much time left if they stay here, so they decide to retreat. But suddenly they notice a huge army of skeletons that has surrounded the El Agero Minotaurs. There is no end to the undead. The army stretches to the horizon and beyond. As soon as the skeletons enter the camp, a fierce battle begins between them and the Minotaurs. Edgar and Brendan decide to escape while the whole mess is happening without their participation. But Damian advises them not to move anywhere, as this time they were terribly unlucky to cross his path. At his command, the Skeleton Lord's heroic form steps forward and summons mountains of bones to him with a spell. In just a moment, these bones form a huge 20-meter skeleton, which immediately bursts into battle. In addition, under the influence of the Skeleton Lord's spell, new Damian fighters begin to appear from the corpses of Edgar and Brendan's fighters. They are shocked that this is possible and are even more determined to get away from here as soon as possible. But as soon as they choose a path to escape, their way is blocked by a huge skeleton. To their surprise, the familiar voice of Damian greets them. Without further ado, he decides to kill Edgar as revenge for his behavior. Brendan can only watch as the giant skeleton kills his ally. However, he immediately asks for mercy, because he never quarreled with Damian. In exchange for his life, he offers the hero all the treasures he has obtained in this dimension. Having given everything he had acquired here to Damian, he immediately runs away while there is still such an opportunity. As for the Minotaurs, within an hour the camp is cleared of them. Those who remain alive fall to their knees before the hero and call him their god and master. The system counts the task as completed, but Damian still lacks points to reach first place. It doesn't help that one of the tasks is carried out by Caroline the next moment. After that, in order to get first place, he urgently needs to defeat the demigod Dark Frog. Damian also sees this as a chance to attract the attention of the Imperial Academy, as the task is incredibly difficult. He decides to take the risk and orders the army to head to the enemy's lair. By this time, almost all the students had already left the abyss, except for Mr. Houston's students. The teachers just wonder what Damian and Caroline are still looking for in that space. Jameson is sure that they are just fooling around there because attacking the frog would be stupid. No one has defeated it before. But Houston is confident in his students because two of them by this time already have the heroic forms of followers. At the same time, Caroline's Thunderbirds rush to attack the Demon Frog's camp. The birds gather into a thundercloud and rain lightning down on their enemies. Many frogs cannot even withstand the blow and die on the spot. This situation immediately attracts the attention of the Dark Frog, who casts a protective spell. Immediately, a dark dome covers the entire territory of the amphibian clan, cutting off all attacks. The voice of the demigod thunders throughout the area, promising a painful death to the attackers. Caroline, in her Thunderbird form, realizes that things are bad, but she doesn't have time to escape. Struck by a beam of dark energy that pierced the dome, she falls inside, into the territory of the frogs. But she manages to activate the purification card that she received from her family, and gets rid of the influence of the curse. Caroline, having regained her strength and energy, concentrates a huge ball of magic and throws it at the protective dome. Her followers, the other Thunderbirds, follow her command and also attack the dome to destroy it. After 3 waves of combined attacks, the dome begins to crack and collapse. But when the way seems clear, the frog demigod sends his brother, the mountain-eating frog, to attack. Immediately, a giant-sized individual appears in front of Caroline. The frog shoots out its incredibly long tongue and wraps it around the Thunderbird. And all this in order to swallow it right away. Caroline, meanwhile, tries unsuccessfully to escape, but her attacks do not cause any harm to such a huge creature. Suddenly, she receives a call from Damian, and the girl is irritated that he is calling at the most inopportune moment. The guy immediately assesses that Caroline's affairs are going badly, and she, irritated, asks him to get to the point. Damian admits that he called with an offer to join forces to fight the Grim Frog. The girl understands that she has no option to reject the offer, but warns that she will take the body of the demigod for herself. The hero agrees to her terms, but in return asks her to send him Thunderbirds. Unexpectedly for himself, he wandered too far to appear in time on the territory of the Frog Clan. Within a couple of minutes, the Thunderbirds find Damian and his army. The skeletons climb onto the backs of Caroline's familiars and ride them towards the swamp. Having reached the battle site together, they attack the frogs with combined efforts. But this task would not have been so highly valued if the amphibians had been so easy to defeat. Damian looks with sadness at the mountains of bones left behind by the deaths of his soldiers. But he doesn't get upset for long. The hero calls on the bone collector to use his abilities. The character casts a spell and the bones begin to gather around him, turning into a huge fighting skeleton. He rises above the lands of the frogs and advances to attack. The heroic forms of the frogs notice his approach and join forces to stop him. But before they can finish, a huge skeleton throws them away with one blow. In addition, 2 heroic forms jump from his shoulders, the Bone Resurrector and the Minotaur. The Minotaur attacks with a huge stone column carved with patterns of frogs that rush to attack. Meanwhile, Skeleton Resurrection activates its ability. In the following minutes, Damian's army is replenished with new fighters who appear from the bodies of defeated enemies. They immediately rush to attack their, until recently, brothers. At the same time, Thunderbirds support the army of skeletons from the sky and attack the frogs with lightning bolts. But seeing that the scales are beginning to tip in the wrong direction, the demigod Gloomy Frog gets down to business. To regain his advantage in battle, he casts the Night Darkness spell. Immediately, darkness envelops the battlefield, and Damian has lost the heroic forms of the characters in the battle. But suddenly Greyfang prays to his god and asks the hero to call him and the Red Goblins into battle. The guy is more than happy about their initiative, because if new heroes can't cope, it's worth turning to proven options. A moment later, a portal opens in the abyss. From there, Grey Fang and the Red Goblins appear, and together they immediately rush into battle. Along with them, demonic insects also entered through the portal, who, although they have no intelligence, wanted to sacrifice themselves. A stream of energy engulfs the insects, incinerating them. After this, a notification appears in front of Damian about receiving a reward for sacrificing creatures. The system gives him the torch Flame of Hope, which removes negative effects and strengthens followers. The hero boldly raises the torch above his head, clearing the battlefield of the frog demigod spell. At this moment, the frog demigod loudly complains because his powerful spell was dispelled by some torch. Damian doesn't answer him, but just flies past with the artifact in his hand. The enemies don't even have a chance to hide. Here his eyes fall upon a huge frog, which for some reason still trembles from time to time. The hero realizes that this must be the demon that swallowed Caroline, and rushes into the attack along with his followers. Together, Grey Fang and the Red Goblin made a huge hole in the frog's belly. At that moment, Caroline flutters out of there in the form of a thunderbird. As soon as she flies off to the required distance, the girl sends a clot of energy towards the huge frog. Due to her size, she doesn't have time to dodge and turns into a charred carcass. Inspired by the return of their commander, the Thunderbirds rush to attack, along with the Red Goblins. After this, the surrounding lands are shaken by powerful explosions. Almost all heroic forms of frogs are destroyed. Without the restraining power of the Grim Frog, the massive skeleton continues its march, turning frogs into mincemeat with its feet. Seeing that the situation has turned around, the frog demigod decides to flee the battlefield. But under the light of the sacred fire, no living creature can escape detection. A thunderbird immediately rushes towards the monster and strikes him with a bolt of lightning. Although the dark frog is a demigod, his own strength is mediocre, and so several bolts from the thunderbird finish him off. Caroline reminds him that this is where the deal ends and she will simply take the demigod's body. Damian descends from the sky and approaches the monster, who, unable to rise, begs him for mercy. But the hero has no doubts and orders Grey Fang to behead the frog. He knows that the monster has nothing to interest him. After the death of their leader, the army of frogs stopped resisting and surrendered. After the victory, the heroes approach a huge pile of treasure. Caroline reminds him that she still has no interest in anything other than the demigod's body. But Damian responds by reminding her of his debt to her, and places a crown on her head as retribution. The girl decides not to argue, even though this crown is more valuable than the guy's debt, and accepts his repayment. Suddenly, the voice of Teacher Houston is heard in the boys' heads, asking them to return to talk about the academies. After returning from the abyss, Caroline and Damian follow him as he advises them to keep a low profile in front of such important people. In the office they come to, there are 3 school leaders and 3 representatives from the best universities. There is silence for a few seconds. The gods, who are the representatives, can easily see the students' information. The representative of the Imperial Academy first decides to talk to Caroline, who, according to his observations, did not take the body of the demigod in vain. It turns out that the girl has everything to create a Lord-level creature, a level that not even all teachers can handle. She also has so many divinity points that the approximate cost alone makes Damian's head spin. The representative likes Caroline's determination and asks her to notify the Academy immediately after progress in her plan. But then he frowns, turning his gaze to Damian, because there is news for him too. The Academy representative already knows that the guy's main familiar is a locust. When the hero confirms this, the man puts a cross on the questionnaire sheet. Also, at the moment, Damian has only 1 point of divinity. This information also deserves to be noted on the sheet. But finally, the representative decides to ask how Damian got the heroic form of the character and the embodiment of the skeleton lord. Here it dawns on the guy that the man doesn't know about his ability to sacrifice followers and decides not to tell about it. At this point, the interview ends, and the representative only wishes Damian success in the entrance exams. Both the head teacher and Houston's teacher are upset that such a talented student failed to catch the attention of the Academy representatives. But he asks them not to worry because he is confident of his success in the exams. The class teacher encourages his student because he was invited to other academies, but Damian is determined to enter the best one. Having dealt with the interview, the hero returns to his divine space. As a reward for first place, he received a card with 1 divinity point and decides not to wait to activate it. In addition, the pile of artifacts that he got after defeating the frog will serve as an excellent resource for developing followers. Having obtained the Source of the Fallen, Damian decides to use it to strengthen the locust. Under the influence of magic, the insects become much stronger and more powerful. The guy decides to call them Fallen Locusts. He buffs the other part of the locusts with Fallen Heart, allowing them to move silently and apply effects. For these abilities, Damian nicknames them Cursed Locusts. Suddenly, the hero is distracted from distributing his buffs by the red demon's pleas for mercy for his misdeed. Alarmed, the guy decides to immediately go to them to find out what all the fuss is about. It turns out that the younger brother of the God Hammer's heroic form accidentally dropped that very hammer into the disintegration mechanism. Naturally, Damian decides to forgive such a sincere follower, but asks him to be more careful next time. Meanwhile, the decay mechanism tirelessly works nearby, and the hero becomes interested in what will come from processing the relic. After 10 minutes, the machine finishes its work and gives back several crystals and a source of the sacred artifact. From the part description, Damian immediately understands that he can fix the gluttony that is currently installed in the core. He decides to conduct an experiment and connects the gluttony scroll and the source of the artifact. The system responds by reporting that the number of recovery cycles for evolution has been reduced. The hero guesses that this way he can completely fix gluttony, but decides to ask people on the forum. But among the discussions, he finds something more interesting. Someone asks for help in repairing a sacred artifact. While everyone is asking the man to give up this idea, Damian decides to write to him and offer his services. Not a minute passes before the hero receives a call from the customer. The man sounds distrustful, but Damian assures him that everything will be fine and offers to hand over several not particularly valuable artifacts. The customer warns that he is under the protection of the anti-fraudster and says that he will deliver items of the level that they say. Damian is amazed by the man's wealth and trust, but decides to try it on first-level things first. The next second, a huge box filled to the brim with artifacts lands right in front of him. He was given over 100 items and the hero sinfully thinks about stealing them. But he immediately changes his mind, remembering how serious the anti-fraud organization is. A little nervous about the outcome of the experiment, he loads the broken artifacts into the machine. After just a few hours, the processing of the items is complete, and the machine gives back 400 crystals and 109 sacred springs. Damian decides to keep a few sources for himself as payment, but gives 100 sources to the customer. He is overjoyed and asks Damian to help him in the divine space as well. Meanwhile, Teacher Houston is already at home, cultivating his new skill. Having won the bet, he happily received his reward, a third-level healing amulet from Jameson. Suddenly, he is distracted from his meditation by a call from Damian. It turns out that the young man is interested in where to get resources to increase the divine core. Houston is not surprised that he did not find this resource, because it is instantly bought up by large corporations. But the teacher knows a place where you can get the necessary fragments: Bloody Arena. However, he warns Damian that the place is too dangerous, as one can lose all his achievements in the blink of an eye. But the guy assures that the risk is not a problem for him and asks to be taken to the Bloody Arena. The next day, the two of them enter a huge, gloomy building. Once inside, Houston asks Damian to put on a mask that will hide the guy's personal information from the demigods and gods. When they approach the check-in desk, an unfriendly worker asks them to fill out a membership form. The fights here are held within the strength categories, but related fights are also possible if the participants insist. There is also no limit on followers, but the teacher recommends fighting only until the hero has more than half of the creatures left. As soon as Damian finishes filling out the form, not even a couple of minutes pass before the system has already selected an opponent for him. He is sucked into the usual whirlpool, but this time the hero feels lost and insecure. When his feet touch the arena floor, the opponent immediately laughs that he recognized the newcomer from the questionnaire from the very beginning. The opponent turns out to have large front teeth like a rat. The man assures that this fight will go faster than Damian thought. The crowd in the stands sighs sympathetically because the guy got such a strong opponent from the very first time. The hero understands that he is clearly up against a strong opponent. Suddenly, a message from the system appears in front of the participants in the battle, asking them to call their followers. The rat-like man has already opened his portal, and a crowd of fat rodents is bursting out from there. But Damian is not far behind and also summons a swarm of locusts, which is clearly larger than the enemy army. The opponent is clearly not impressed because insects are no match for rodents, and suggests that the guy just give up and go home. But the hero refuses, and a moment later the signal to begin the battle sounds. Immediately, at the command of their god, the rats take out small crossbows and launch arrows into the sky to hit the insects. Damian doesn't wait. He immediately orders the cursed locust to create a protective barrier. This causes the arrows to break when they hit the defense, without even hitting a single target. The rats also failed to achieve any success on their second attempt, but they are not going to stop. While they are busy with fruitless attacks, Damian orders the locusts to slip past and strike the rodents in the rear. Blending into the shadows, the locusts quickly and quietly find themselves behind the rats. With this tactic, the enemy is unable to do anything when the curse of slowness, weakness, and blindness falls upon him. The attacks on Damian's army immediately cease, and demonic bugs enter the scene to finish off the weakened enemy. Insects use their poisonous stings to attack from a distance. In a split minute, the number of surviving creatures in the rat-like man's body is reduced to incredible proportions. He can't believe he lost so quickly and easily, but decides not to risk his familiars and gives up. After this, an impenetrable barrier instantly rises between the opponents. Damian was about to add more skeletons to his army, but a crystal appeared that absorbed the corpses of rats. After this, the crystal flies up to the hero. This is his reward for winning the battle. As the system returns him to the waiting room, Mr. Houston praises his student for his incredible performance. He guesses that the guy will want to fight again and warns that next time the reward will be even greater. Damian is very happy about this news. He plans to fully strengthen the core, and for this he needs many fragments. A month later, having mastered the arena, he had already received enough fragments for 7 levels of improvement. But Damian knows that for a higher level he will need even more fragments, and he wonders where he can get them faster. As if reading his thoughts, the teacher informs him that with Damian's level of strength, he could compete with some kind of demigod. As a reward for winning such a battle, the hero will receive a fragment 10 times stronger than the previous ones. Also, a bonus for the number of victories will be added to this, which will further strengthen the fragment. Damian thinks, but only for a moment. Having weighed all the risks, he still decides to apply to participate in the inter-rank battle. The worker gives him a distrustful look, but the hero replies that he is confident in his choice. Within a couple of hours, the application is approved, and the stadium is buzzing with excitement about the newcomer who is jumping above his head. The audience is sure that he will never be able to compete with the demigods and considers the guy crazy for such an adventure. Mr. Houston nervously informs his charge that the odds are not in Damian's favor right now. Unexpectedly, he asks to place a bet for him. The teacher replies that he will add his own money, and in case of victory, he will also give a gift. Although the teacher's words did not motivate Damian, he himself began to get nervous, because it was not only his reputation that was at stake. So before the fight, he decides to look into his divine space to improve the core. He is confident that in the upcoming battle, gluttony and poison will no longer be as useful as before. But he has an idea that his valuable client can help him with. Damian asks if he can get some high-ranking artifacts, and the customer happily agrees. Overjoyed, the hero asks to send him several powerful artifacts with the attributes of poison, earth, darkness, and fire. Within moments, the client sends him a huge package containing everything he asked for. In the box, Damian finds 50 artifacts, of which only 2 will be useful to his locusts. Magma Sphere carries the power of the earth and fire attributes, and Shadow Nail carries the power of the darkness attribute. Both artifacts are perfect for the cursed bugs, so the hero immediately plunges them into the divine core. Immediately, locusts from all over the space gather near the source of power. Some individuals do not change at all, while others undergo significant changes. Just as Damian finishes evolving his followers, the system invites him back into the arena to begin the fight. Immediately, he is sucked into a familiar whirlpool, returning to the ring. As soon as he enters the building, he hears the crowd shouting in support of the Lord of the Mammoths. The man is pleased that he will be the one to teach the newcomer a lesson, and tells the hero to prepare to lose all his followers. But Damian only asks him to talk less and start the fight sooner. A portal opens behind the man and mammoths emerge in enhanced form. Standing on top of his pride and joy, the Thunder Mammoth, he asks Damian to hold on for at least a couple of seconds. He does not respond to his opponent, but only calls upon his numerous swarm of locusts and orders the insects to attack. The attack involves various forms of insects, enhanced by different combinations of artifacts. The demigod admits with a smile that now he really is interested. As soon as the arena's signal sounds, both armies rush towards each other to attack. The first flank is attacked by shadow locusts, throwing their stingers forward. Their attack does no harm to the mammoth, but lands on its shadow. Spectators are delighted when the stings hit the ground and paralyze an entire mammoth. Following this, the mammoth is attacked by poisonous celestial beetles. The Lord of the Mammoths only laughs because the locust did not kill his followers, but only stopped some of them. In response to these words, Damian only smiles and asks to wait a moment. And indeed, a few seconds later, a huge explosion is heard. caused by the locusts. The Lord of the Mammoths tries to maintain his composure, although he is terrified. He orders the mammoths to guard thunder. Do not line up in the path of insect attack. Their collision results in explosion after explosion. The Mammoth Lord is trying his best to preserve his army, and therefore uses spells of strengthening and healing. After these spells, the wounded mammoths begin to rise to their feet, and their bodies are covered with a layer of protective magic. After this, the exploding locust can only weaken the defense, but does not cause damage to the enemy. The Mammoth Lord admits that he is impressed that he was forced to use magic, and so suggests that Damian simply surrender. But the guy only replies that there is no point in him giving up in this fight. He opens a new portal from which Minotaur warriors burst forth. They immediately rush to attack the giant mammoths, which are distracted by the locusts. The Lord of the Mammoths is shocked, because he did not expect such followers from the arena newcomer. At this time, the heroic form of the Minotaur fights the Thunder Mammoth with the help of the totem. Once the mammoth is killed, Damian summons an army of skeletons to the battlefield. They appear on the battlefield from a portal. The Bone Collector, Skeleton Lord, and Resurrectionist bring up the rear. The three are very surprised when the hero jumps onto the stone throne and gives them instructions. The Skeleton Lord seems very unhappy with the guy's actions but can't do anything about it. The Resurrector is the first to burst into battle, but he approaches not the living mammoths, but the dead ones. A moment later, the mammoth skeleton leaves the shackles of flesh and blood to join the army of the dead. The Lord of the Mammoths is amazed by such impudence and immediately orders the mammoths to activate the War March skill. The eyes of his followers fill with blood and the animals, maddened, rush to attack. The mammoth skeleton that gets in their way is immediately broken into its individual component bones. Damian immediately orders the Minotaurs to retreat and sends the Bone Collector forward in return. Once on the front lines, he uses his abilities to attract the bones that litter the floor. With each limb he pulls in, he grows larger until there is a 20-meter skeleton in the arena. The Lord of the Mammoths is very surprised by the appearance of a heroic type of follower on the side of some newcomer. Gathering his last strength, he activates the skill Gigantism to equalize the size of his creatures to a skeleton. Under the influence of magic, the already large mammoth acquires truly gigantic dimensions. The massive mammoth charges forward, its tusks coated in lightning bolts to deal additional damage. But as soon as he gets close enough, the giant skeleton grabs him by the tusks and stops him. The next moment, the skeleton throws the animal over its shoulder and swings. He slams the mammoth onto the floor in front of him, sending huge clouds of smoke billowing out over the arena. The animal tries to get up, even after receiving such huge damage, but the skeleton deals a strong blow. But suddenly the mammoth intercepts his hand with its trunk and throws the dead man away from itself. While he is trying to get up, the animal is already rushing to attack in order to trample the skeleton. But the dead man turns away at the last moment, avoiding the mammoth's attack. He jumps on the animal's neck and begins to deliver a series of blows. Also, in a fit of rage, he breaks off one of the mammoth's tusks. This is considered the greatest disgrace among mammoths. The Lord understands that his follower will now definitely lose his strength of spirit and asks the animal not to give up. But the mammoth begins to resist less and less, accepting its fate, even when the skeleton breaks off its second tusk. Even Damian is shocked by this outcome, because before this he simply asked the collector to focus on hand-to-hand combat. Having dealt with the enemy, the skeleton kicks the lifeless body of the mammoth away from itself. The blow sends the animal straight to the feet of its owner, who almost runs away in confusion. Having come to his senses in time, the man commands the remaining mammoths to surround the giant skeleton and wear it out. The mammoths immediately rush to carry out the order, although their attack looks pathetic, considering the difference in size. The collector simply kicks away his attackers. They don't stop running towards him, following the order, but even a simple blow with a fist is enough to prevent the skeleton from receiving damage. But soon the giant begins to get tired, because there are too many opponents, which is compensated by their small size. He ends up prostrate on the floor while the mammoths continue to deal small, but still damage to him. Damian immediately sends minotaurs to help the collector while he recovers his strength. While the mammoths are distracted by their huge target, the minotaurs easily kill them one by one. Those who die are immediately transformed by the Resurrectionist into mammoth skeletons that will serve Damian. The dead, apparently not afraid of death, rush into battle against those with whom they were on the same side a minute ago. Soon the Lord of the Mammoths is left with only a tenth of his followers. Realizing that it is simply dangerous to continue, the man accepts his defeat with a sigh. A crystal appears again above the arena, into which the bodies of dead mammoths are sucked. transforming into energy. As usual, the stone falls into the hands of the winner, and Damian notices that the core fragment is larger due to the fight with a stronger opponent. He is pulled out of his thoughts by an announcement from the loudspeakers. The management of the bloody arena invites him to an audience. The next moment, he is sucked into a whirlpool to be transported to the office. There is no one inside the room, but a disembodied voice assures the boy that no harm will come to him. The management admits that they have been watching him closely since the start of the fight and are very impressed with his performance. It turns out that he was considered worthy of becoming the heir to the bloody arena, because he is the one who defeated the opponent, stronger than himself. Damian realizes that the arena is too big and profitable to offer it to someone like him. He guesses that this place must have many heirs, but asks to explain the conditions of inheritance. The projection that appeared replies that the representatives are impressed by his intelligence and are ready to answer all questions. It turns out that the arena already has 349 heirs. By becoming one of them, Damian will receive the right to freely visit any of the worlds connected to the arena, but for money. He will also be able to build an arena in his space to speed up the evolution of his followers. But as soon as there are 500 heirs, they will have to clash in battle to determine the true heir. Damian knows that this test will not be easy, given the strength of the arena participants and their determination for such money. On the other hand, there are still 1,500 people missing before the final test, which gives the guy a head start for his development. Having assessed all possible options for the development of events, Damian decides to agree to become the heir to the bloody arena. Suddenly, a red laser shoots into his shoulder, marking him as the heir to the arena. He is then teleported back, taking Teacher Houston by surprise. He immediately runs up to the guy in joy and announces that now the two of them are rich. Damian is still confused when the man hands him a card with divine energy points. The hero can't believe his eyes when he sees that his bet has turned into 1 billion points. The teacher sees his surprise but assures him that it is very easy to spend such a sum and recommends buying artifacts first. The guy replies that he most likely has not yet developed enough to use truly powerful artifacts. But Mr. Houston asks you to trust yourself and suggests going to the store where you can choose an artifact to your taste. Suddenly, their sweet conversation is interrupted by a scream. The Lord of the Mammoths is running towards them at full speed. Damian immediately hides behind the teacher's back and asks him to protect himself, and he is even ready to fight. But the Lord of the Mammoths stops a meter away from them and assures them that they have got it all wrong. The man admits that he was looking for Damian to befriend and identifies himself as Vincent Hicks. He also turns out to be a first-year student at the Imperial Academy, and the hero happily shakes his hand. Vincent guesses that he is a schoolboy, but assumes that the guy has already passed the entrance exam. He is shocked when Damian admits that he has not yet been accepted into any of the introductory courses. The former rival asks him not to lie, because he does not see the possibility that such a talent could have been missed. Mr. Houston intervenes in the conversation and tells about the interview where Damian did not impress the representative of the Imperial Academy. Vincent knows that this academy is the most powerful in the country and how difficult it can be to get in. But he has seen for himself the hero's talent, and therefore promises to help in any way he can, recommending him to the leadership. Damian is very surprised that his rival decided to help him get into the academy of his dreams just like that. But he replies that there is another reason. It turns out that the academy gives bonuses to talented candidates if they complete the task. The hero thanks the guy with all his heart, and he only asks in return not to waste time and to prepare hard. The next day, Damian and Mr. Houston find themselves in front of an artifact store. Inside, they are met by a charming girl who immediately decides to take the guests straight to Master Kramer. She takes them to the portal and asks them not to delay. Damian is the first to pass through the portal and sees a fat but strong blacksmith who greets Houston. Houston then enters through the portal and introduces the blacksmith to his apprentice. He greets both of them, but not very affably notes that he does not give discounts to pupils and students. Meanwhile, the teacher asks the hero not to be afraid, because the old man, although grumpy, is kind at heart and a master of his craft. Kramer calls them into a huge storeroom to show them his special assortment. Inside there are hundreds, if not thousands, of artifacts. Moreover, each of the artifacts was made by the blacksmith personally. While looking through the contents of the pantry, Houston asks Damian to let him know if he sees anything he likes. The hero decides that entering the academy is now a priority, and therefore decides to ask about the goo pitcher. This artifact helps to breed the strongest individuals and assist their evolution up to a heroic form. Houston is happy with his decision, because even though the second level is not particularly strong, the goo jug fits Damian perfectly. The blacksmith replies that such an artifact would cost almost 600 divine power, and doubts that the apprentice has that kind of money. Mr. Houston immediately comes to the rescue and asks his old friend to either lower the price or give him another artifact as a gift. Although reluctantly, Kramer gives the hero the Eye of Identification if he is willing to buy the jug. Having successfully completed the exchange, Damian and the teacher head towards the exit, but are called out by the blacksmith. It turns out that he recently came across fragments of an ancient artifact, from which he was able to create a working model. Houston is the first to decide to look at the artifact, but finds nothing unusual in it, not even magical energy. Enraged, he rushes to Kramer for an explanation of why he wants to deceive private buyers. The blacksmith asks him to calm down and explains that this ball, the Hungry Top, is being improved at the expense of other artifacts. According to legend, this artifact inherits the functions and effects of the artifacts it absorbed. Kramer is confident that Damian has an excellent sense for artifacts, and therefore decided to offer this one for sale, for 1 billion. The hero immediately suspects that such a valuable artifact would not be sold so cheaply, and decides that there is some deception here after all. Seeing the guy's serious face, the blacksmith admits that his copy of the Hungry Top is not perfect, and tells the details. Despite the imperfections, Damian decides to buy this artifact, but for 400 million. Although the item seems weak, the hero can already see situations where it can be used. The guy admits out loud that he would pay more for such a device, but he simply doesn't have more money. Kramer assumes that the young man is simply cheating to get a discount, but Damian assures him that this is not the case. The master decides to trust him and agrees to the deal in order to leave a good impression of himself. The hero gets home and, having drawn a summoning circle on the floor, begins cultivation. To bind the artifacts to himself, he uses his own blood as a sacrifice. There are no problems with the binding of the Eye of Identification, and the goo jar, a spiritual being, a poisonous frog, also jumps out of the jug. At the same time, the hungry wolf is stubborn about the binding and says that more blood is required for the binding. Only when the hero infuses the artifact with enough blood does powerful energy burst out of it. From this energy, a creature resembling a wolf cub quickly forms. Damian does not hide his disappointment because he expected more from a copy of a mythical item. The puppy loudly announces that he is hungry, and the hero has to think about where to get him food, because there is no money now. Eventually, he gives the puppy an energy crystal, and the animal happily bites into it. Meanwhile, all of Damian's followers feel the influence of the new artifacts. It itself raises gluttony by several points, allowing creatures to evolve thanks to regular food. In the long run, all of the hero's locusts could soon reach elite form if he had enough food for them. Within a week, there are so many locusts that the hero is ready for the next sacrifice. An energy storm instantly kills 13 billion individuals. After this, as always, Damian is offered a choice of 3 reward options. The hero is interested in the possibility of transforming creatures into humanoid forms, which also increases the intelligence of the creatures. Damian decides to go to the divine core to replace the sphere of fire, earth, and lava with a new one. As soon as he places the sphere inside, powerful streams of energy burst out from the ground. Here he immediately sees millions of locusts that are affected by these energy flows. Very soon their bodies begin to transform, acquiring more human features. After a complete transformation, many locusts turn into a new species, the locust people. Not only did they become stronger, but they also significantly strengthened their faith in their god. But unexpectedly, the hero is distracted from this matter by a call from the teacher. He calls to report interesting news. It turns out that a representative of the Imperial Academy wants to see Damian again. The next day after another lesson, Gilbert, the boy's classmate, approaches him with a business proposal. Damian immediately warns that he is only interested in fragments for the core. This answer does not bother Gilbert at all, but he immediately warns that fragments are always very expensive. But he assures that his family can accept 1,000 elite-type skeletons as payment. Damian is more than satisfied with these terms of the deal and immediately agrees. His compliance makes his classmate doubt that the deal is equal, but it is too late for him to change anything. Meanwhile, Mr. Houston enters the classroom and calls the hero to go to a meeting with a representative of the academy. Mr. Gonzalez is very surprised when he finds out who he is going to interview. Naturally, he remembered the young man from the last time and his impression of him, but still wonders how he received the recommendation. The academy representative greets Damian and announces that he will conduct a personal test for him today on behalf of the academy. The hero must travel to the space of Dolan, which is based on a hierarchy system. The main objective will be to hunt one of the master defenders, who in turn will hunt Damian. There are 5 such masters in total, but Mr. Gonzalez instructs the guy to find out the rest of the information on his own. The hero decides that it is time for decisive action and tells the teacher about his desire to exchange class points for artifacts. But before that, he decides to improve the divine core. By adding new fragments to it, he gets the 10th level and can now add as many as 3 artifacts. First, he adds the artifact Poison Glands, which will give some individuals the ability to poison. The second one he loads is the Core of the Earth, which increases the level of protection of the creatures. Third, he loads the Short Bow, which will allow followers to master this type of long-range weapon. When the download is successfully completed, their influence spreads to all of space and 5 billion locusts. Damian is incredibly happy with the results of his experiment and is now definitely ready to fight for his place at the academy. An hour later, the hero comes back to Mr. Gonzalez, who hands him a sphere to move to Dolan. The guy boldly touches the artifact, and his entire body begins to be covered with magical flows. A moment later, he is transported into an unfamiliar space, along with his locust familiars. The system immediately names him a demon destroyer, the Lord of Locusts, and begins to calculate his danger level. But after a few minutes, a familiar status window appears in front of the hero, where he is assigned the maximum level. The situation is similar with the Locust people, but they are only assigned a danger level of 60. He is interrupted from studying the indicators by the Locust Man to tell him that they are being attacked by local creatures. Damian immediately saddles the damned Locust and follows his follower to the scene of events. On the other side of the forest, adventurer Thorn looks with indignation at the demons who suddenly appeared. His partner, Iron Fist, on the contrary, is happy because they are entitled to a large reward for the destruction of such creatures. The Water Sage, who is also on their team, is only too happy to mine the energy crystals they get from the enemy. And the Fire Mage loves to destroy and fight the most. Carried away by the fight, she thinks of nothing else. By this time, Damian arrives to investigate the attack on his followers. Using the Eye of Identification, the hero determines the levels of opponents and their skills. It's not hard for him to notice the difference in the creature's emblems. Everyone in the group has a bronze color, while Thorn's is silver. Damian decides that the guy is the leader of this group of adventurers. Pretty soon, they realize that there are too many demons and decide to retreat. But their path to retreat is unexpectedly blocked by a Locust Man. The adventurers immediately realize that there is a strong creature in front of them and begin to back away. Thorn orders his comrades to flee immediately, and he decides to hold off the Locusts with all his might. The next moment, he rushes into the attack and delivers a powerful blow with his steel sword. Unfortunately for him, such an attack leaves only a barely noticeable cut on the Locust's body. That's when Thorn despairingly realizes that his opponent is too strong and he has nowhere to escape. It's the Locust Man's turn to attack, and with one casual blow, he sends the adventurer flying away. After this, the insect rushes after the other 3 adventurers. Pretty soon, all 4 find themselves tied up on the ground, with no way to escape. Damian approaches them with a menacing aura, causing the adventurers to flinch in fear. Iron Fist begins to scream for the monster to stay away from them. Damian is unexpectedly more irritated by this than he should be, since he certainly doesn't look like a monster. That is why he decides to first ask the question of how the horses see him. The guy snaps at the hero again, for which he gets attacked with an energy ball right in the chest. The Water and Fire Mages begin to scream, for which they suffer the same death as their comrade. Even the hero is frightened by this, because he did not give any order to attack, but simply wanted to question the adventurers. After this, he decides to ask Thorn about his appearance. The guy decides not to resist and describes a creature that resembles a huge insect with antennae and huge eyes. His words remind the hero of the Locust people, and he understands that the system has disfigured him in the eyes of the locals. However, he decides to continue asking Thorn questions about this world. Only after 3 hours his questions run out and he decides to let the adventurer go. The guy immediately jumps up and runs, looking back at Damian with apprehension along the way. Despite the pain of losing his comrades, Thorn decides to run to the guild to tell about the demon army. Damian, meanwhile, follows him until he notices a city in the distance. After this, he decides to kill the last adventurer so that he doesn't make a fuss. But now, the hero's strength is not enough to attack the city, and he decides to find creatures to replenish the army for now. It doesn't take long before he discovers a tribe of goblins led by an unusually strong character. At the same time, the others are not distinguished by their skills or strength. Damian decides to ask the leader about his profession. The goblin leader replies that he obtained his profession by absorbing many profession fragments from the bodies of adventurers. Finally, the hero gets an answer to his question and a clue on how to quickly strengthen his familiars. He immediately commands the locusts to go in search of adventurers and bring back all the profession fragments. 3 days later, the hero finds himself in possession of a decent number of fragments. Once he is satisfied with their number, he begins the ritual of combining them. As a result, the system offers the hero 4 professions to choose from: warrior, magician, fighter, and archer. Damian decides to choose an archer, since his locusts already have a predisposition for this weapon. Under the influence of their profession, locust people undergo changes and open up the possibility for evolution. Now the hero's army is not just locusts, but locust archers, and even local heroes will have a hard time dealing with them. Suddenly, one of the informers, a small locust, tells his god that they have discovered an unusual cave. Within half an hour, Damian finds himself in front of the entrance to the cave and feels the influence of a powerful aura from there. The energy also contains elements of divine power, and this intrigues the guy even more. After a few minutes of exploring the cave, he is very surprised to find a huge dragon in chains inside. The teacher told us in class that in some worlds there live dragons, which the inhabitants seal away, fearing their power. Using the Eye of Identification, Damian notices that the dragon Elphys has a fairly high level despite being sealed. Suddenly the creature wakes up, noticing the strangers, and its eyes flash from the darkness of the cave. Succumbing to the dragon's frightening influence, the locust people turn around and head towards the cave entrance. When Damian orders them to stay here, they still obey, although they cannot help but tremble in fear. Elphys approaches the ledge they are standing on, unhappy that his sleep has been interrupted. He begins to concentrate dark energy in his mouth, and the hero, along with his retinue, is forced to escape. The attack is so strong that Damian would definitely not have survived it, and the hero is glad that he escaped. Despite this, after 5 minutes he again tries to talk to the dragon, hoping that he has changed his anger to mercy. Unfortunately, the dragon takes his interest as a mockery and prepares another attack. Damian is forced to escape from the cave again. 10 minutes later, he decides to try again, assuring that he came here with good intentions to help Elphys. The dragon warns that he has seen through his trick, and therefore advises him to leave and forget about this place. Tired of endless running, Damian decides to prove to the monster what he is capable of and takes out his bow. Unfortunately, the arrow only breaks on the dragon's impenetrable scales, leaving no scratch. Damian decides to try a different tactic and draws his sword, launching into another attack. As expected, this attack doesn't do much damage to the dragon. For the 3rd time, the hero decides to play it safe. To prove his strength to Elphys, he strengthens his attack with divine energy. This time he still manages to leave quite deep cuts on the dragon's body. The monster only becomes more angry that they dared to attack him. In response, the guy assures that he has enough weapons to finish him off, but offers a peaceful solution. Having realized the true strength of her interlocutor, Elphys decides to find out what he is trying to achieve by breaking in here. Damian talks about his mission to kill the guardian heroes, in which the dragon's power can play a big role. The dragon decides to point out the obvious. He has been chained here for 100 years by artifact chains that even he is unable to destroy. Suddenly, a smile spreads across the guy's face, surprising Elphys. Damian summons a wolf, deciding to test its abilities in such a difficult situation. The dragon watches in astonishment as one of the chains holding him breaks. Emboldened, he begins to order Damian like a slave to free him quickly. But Damian reminds him that he is the key to Elphys' freedom and demands respect for it. The dragon realizes his mistake and agrees to help kill the heroes in exchange for freedom. But this is not enough for the hero. He offers the monster to add another 100 years of service to the murder. In response, Elphys furiously declares that dragons will never be anyone's slaves. Damian also angrily reminds him that he has the power to either let him go or kill him, because he will benefit in both cases. The dragon understands that he has no winning cards, and therefore promises to serve the hero for 100 years. Not trusting the creature's words, the hero insists that he back up his promise with a contract. At first, such a proposal offends the dragon, but the hero also promises to feed him energy crystals. Strangely enough, this is what helps Elphys make a decision, and he signs a contract to serve the hero. Only after this does Damian release the wolf cub back into the wild so that he can continue eating the shackles. After a couple of minutes, the dragon is freed and joyfully releases a beam of energy into the sky, shaking the entire cave. At this time, news of the dragon's release reaches the 5 defenders. The High Master suggests attacking the dragon now, while it is still weakened from its imprisonment. The dragon slayer recalls how he once killed a dragon on his own and decides to go it alone this time too. Another hero, Windrunner, asks to go with him, and together they head to the cave. By the time the dragon and Damian get outside, various monsters and animals have already gathered around the cave. The hero decides to give a fiery speech, in which he calls on them all to unite in the demon alliance against the guild. The creatures, although inspired by his speech, doubt that they have enough strength to fight against such enemies. Damian understands that they are right, and therefore offers them energy crystals, equipment, and profession fragments as a reward. Several days pass in preparation for the battle. Elphys decides to strengthen her master with her own blood. But when he starts talking about 500 crystals for restoration, Damian is forced to slow him down. Soon the dragon bloodbath bears fruit. Damian not only receives a new profession, but also increased characteristics and defense. As soon as the guy activates the new skill, his body begins to transform, acquiring dragon-like features. At the same moment, after several days of searching, the Hunters Guild finds the location of the freed dragon. Damian feels a strong gust of wind as he sees 2 arrows rushing towards him. These arrows turn out to be the city's heroic defenders. The Dragon Slayer glances at Elphys with a grin, because he expects to get a level up for killing him. He asks Windrunner to take care of the smaller enemies while he deals with the dragon. The archer then raises his hand and sets up a storm barrier, limiting the area to 10 kilometers. The defenders admit that they did not expect that there was a demon as powerful as Damian in their world. But despite this, Windrunner intends to remove any obstacles in the path of his comrade. The guy changes the shape of his weapon to a blade and offers to begin. The hero immediately jumps up and throws several swords at him. Windrunner deftly dodges, jumping up. In just a split second, he finds himself behind Damian, ready to strike back. His movements are so fast and graceful that the hero even feels like there are 2 of them. While he and Elphys are fighting the enemy, he decides to send Locust to destroy the barrier. The Dragon Slayer, meanwhile, does not wait and activates his skill. Several dragon incarnations rush to attack Elphys, and he barely manages to dodge them in the sky. He is so busy avoiding their attacks that he only notices the Dragon Slayer attacking him from behind at the last moment. Naturally, he has no chance to dodge, and a powerful blow hits him right on the shoulder. Having lost the ability to fly, Elphys falls to the ground and loses consciousness. The Dragon Slayer, reveling in his victory, commands the dragon incarnations to carry his body to Dolan City. Finally, he decides to make sure that Windrunner is okay. Windrunner replies that he will finish the battle soon. Several dragon incarnations grab the body of the unconscious dragon and carry it through the gap in the barrier. Damian is beside himself with anger, because the locusts are still busy destroying the archer's spell and are rushing the creatures. Despite their weakness, millions and billions of insects begin to work with redoubled efforts. Soon their efforts are rewarded, and the barrier surrounding the battlefield is destroyed around them. Having finished with the previous task, the insects immediately rush to Windwing. The guy's initially self-confident mood quickly turns into panic when there are too many insects. After just a couple of minutes, only his skeleton, gnawed by insects, appears on the ground. A communication window immediately appears, and Mr. Gonzalez congratulates the hero on completing the task. But to his surprise, Damian asks to stay here a little longer. The guy explains that he made a contract with the dragon, and therefore he simply has to save him. The Academy representative warns that this undertaking would be risky even for a demigod, because the guy is going against an entire city. But Damian is not afraid of this, and he only asks to give him the opportunity to use all his creatures. Mr. Gonzalez is shocked by his determination to take over an entire city and gives his go-ahead to continue the test. Right there next to the hero, a huge portal opens from which all the creatures that follow the guy emerge. An army of adventurers will be waiting for him in the city, and Damian suspects that even heroic forms will not be enough. Therefore, he decides to send locusts to gather all the monsters from the local forest to himself. Meanwhile, the goblins and the ghoul decide that they are not worth risking their lives for Damian. The Wolfman suggests simply killing the guy and taking all the crystals from him. But unexpectedly for his interlocutors, his severed head simply falls from his shoulders. Damian himself and his retinue join the goblins to find out who was plotting against him. One of the goblins gathers his courage and declares that they swore to serve the dragon, not some demon. In response to such impudence, Damian attacks the goblin with a blast of energy. The rest of his tribe realize that they are better off obeying orders and at least having a chance to live. After understanding, Damian leads his army, consisting of different creatures, into battle towards the city. Meanwhile, in Dolan, Elphys was chained in the main square to be publicly executed. An assistant rushes to the Dragon Slayer to report on the preparations and the Holy Maiden's question about Windrunner. It turns out that he still hasn't returned, although half a day has already passed. But the man is sure that everything is fine with him. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by an incredibly powerful tremor of the earth. Alarms are immediately sounded. All children and women are advised to hide because a huge army of demons is approaching the city. For the first time in living memory, so many creatures had banded together to attack. All men, even non-adventurers, are called to battle. Mages are asked to shoot down targets in the sky while the infantry fights monsters. But suddenly, a rain of arrows falls on them from the sky, and many adventurers die before the battle. The arrows were fired by locust people, who were also enhanced by artifacts. But the counterattack is not long in coming. Adventurers leave the city to attack the approaching enemy with magic. But the locust people turned out to be smarter. They avoid damage by flying higher than the attack's reach. Meanwhile, the army of monsters has already arrived at the city gates and is starting to break inside. Damian does not wait and sends forward the Resurrector and the Collector. They immediately begin to use their skills, turning dead enemy soldiers into their allies, into skeletons. Raising their weapons again, the dead run to attack their own comrades. Meanwhile, the gates to the city cannot withstand the onslaught, and monsters break into the city. But suddenly their path is cut off by the Holy Virgin of Roses. The girl immediately gets to work. She activates her ability, Pink Forest, and thorny branches shoot out from her feet. These branches form a thick wall that prevents monsters from advancing further into the city. At this moment, the Dragon Slayer bursts into battle, activating the Fire Sword skill. This attack alone sets a wall of pink branches on fire, damaging nearby monsters. At the same time, the Supreme Master sends the infantry forward to meet the enemies as expected. All the adventurers move forward. The army of mages gathers together and begins to cast a spell. Different types of magic are combined into a single destructive force that destroys any monsters. Meanwhile, the Dragon Slayer prepares to complete the ritual in the square to reward the adventurers. Seeing this situation, Damian decides to use his main trump card in his sleeve, the Bone Collector. In its initial form, the skeleton easily makes its way across the battlefield undetected, drawing to itself the bones of those who fall in battle. When his transformation using the remains of others is complete, a huge 20-meter skeleton appears in front of the city. He immediately breaks through to the thickets of thorny branches, but the elemental magic of the mages does not cause him any harm. That is why he easily grabs the thickets and pulls them out, clearing the way for Damian's army. The hero himself is the first to burst into the city and shouts to Elphys that he and his army have come to save him. In the middle of the square, the dragon opens his eyes to make sure he's not imagining things. To his delight, he sees a familiar figure standing in front of him. At this time, 4 heroic defenders look at the square from the balcony and are amazed at the courage of the demon leader. The Supreme Master cannot stand to see his city go to hell and rushes off to deal with Damian. But as the man approaches the hero, one of the Minotaurs steps forward and throws him away with a blow from his fist. Suddenly, the Holy Virgin of Roses also appears nearby and attacks with her thorny branches. But one of the red goblins rushes past, using the power of the Thunder Hammer and burning the branches to ash. The Dragon Slayer also descends onto the square, obviously irritated that his plans were interrupted so close to success. The next second, he activates his most powerful skill, Dragon's Death. Immediately, several projections of dragons rush to attack Damian. But suddenly, the Bone Collector intervenes in the battle and distracts the projection's attention onto himself. At this time, the Skeleton Lord is confusedly stroking his skull, hungry. But then he notices a projection of a dragon in the sky and jumps up, straddling it. Suddenly, he bites into the enemy. Immediately, the projection begins to become weaker and more transparent. But by that time, the Dragon Slayer had already noticed the enemy, who devoured his spell and rushed to attack. With a powerful blow of his sword, he knocks the Skeleton Lord off the dragon projection. The skeleton lands on the ground, the crunch of bones is heard, and the warrior sighs with relief. But the next moment, the Lord's bones grow back together, and he deftly escapes from the man. He immediately jumps onto another dragon projection and begins to devour it, driving the Dragon Slayer into a frenzy. Damian, meanwhile, is going to free Elphys from his chains and sends the wolf cub. The dragon is surprised that so much mercy was shown to him and promises to repay this debt. The hero replies that he will accept several more centuries of service as gratitude and feeds the monster crystals. Despite the conversation with the dragon, the guy always keeps an eye on the battlefield. That is why he notices in time one of the red golans, who is wounded by branches covered with thorns. He immediately sends forward several locust people to help the divine hammer. Damian realizes that the situation is critical and that he urgently needs to leave the city with his army. Suddenly, Elphys leans towards him and says that she is rewarding the hero with a special talent, Rebel. As he said this, rays of light began to shine from his eyes, enveloping Damian. Immediately, a mysterious voice in the guy's head begins to whisper mysterious words that he does not understand. After this, the hero felt an incredible surge of strength in his body. Drawing his sword, he charges towards the Dragon Slayer. He barely manages to block the blow with his sword. But the force of the attack turns out to be so great that the man is surprised that such a blow is even possible. As the two of them compete in strength, the guardian hero is approached from behind by the skeleton lord. His sharp, glass-like claws easily pierce a man's body and tear his heart apart. After the man's lifeless body falls to the ground, the skeleton lord activates his summoning skill. As a result, the army of the dead is replenished with the bloody skeleton. The Holy Virgin is knocked down. She is brought to Damian and immediately begins to mourn him for the murder of his comrades. The guy replies that she is next and orders the divine hammer to deal with her. Meanwhile, the swordsman of ice and fire fights Grey Fang. The forces seem equal until Damian intervenes in their fight. It was a little harder for the defender to stand up to two opponents at the same time, but he was able to deflect several blows. Unfortunately, even with his skills, he is quickly defeated by Grey Fang's heroic form. Left as the only hero defender, the Supreme Master realizes that he has lost and shouts for everyone to retreat. But suddenly his path is blocked by the skeleton of his own comrade, whom he recognizes by his clothes. Shocked by what he saw, he doesn't even notice how the hero of the Minotaurs attacks him. After the death of all the defenders, the remaining members of the Adventurers Guild flee the city. Damian comes out in front of his army and congratulates the monsters on their victory. He also orders all the city's treasures to be brought here. After dividing up the loot, the hero turns to the freed dragon with the hope that he will soon regain his former strength. Elphys thanks him for saving her and promises that she will always follow him from now on. Suddenly, a communication window appears next to Damian, and Mr. Gonzalez congratulates him on conquering the city. The portal from here to home will remain active for a few more hours, but the hero decides to ask for a permanent portal to be installed. The Academy representative doubts the wisdom of this decision, since this way the enemies will be able to penetrate the boy's divine space. But Damian assures him that he has already weighed all the pros and cons. In the end, Mr. Gonzalez agrees to arrange everything. 10 days later, the city of Dolan is completely in the hero's possession, but he decides to leave the skeletons and minotaurs here for now. The skeleton lord remains in charge, and Damian asks him not to be a hero and to retreat if necessary. After this, he opens a portal to enter the real world. Finding himself back in the school corridors, he meets a teacher who looks at him strangely. It turns out that Damian's eyes acquired an unusual hue during the mission. The guy decides that it might have something to do with his new talent, Rebel. But, unexpectedly for him, the description of the talent does not open, because this requires a higher level. While Damian was looking for the reason, a representative of the Academy approached him, congratulating him on the successful completion of the task. Unfortunately, several conditions must be met at once, including the number of divinity points and the development of followers. Damian is doing well in terms of creature evolution, but he fails in other areas. The man wishes him luck in fulfilling the conditions, because the young man lacks only 1 point of divinity. The hero does not miss the opportunity to ask Mr. Houston for a point on loan, but he admits that he spent it all yesterday. But he reminds that students have the opportunity to earn divinity on the exam, earning a hurt look from Damian. After this conversation, the guy returns to his divine space and decides to use the sacrifice skill. Hundreds of millions of locusts turn into streams of energy around him. But to his disappointment, he does not receive divinity. The hero decides to try again tomorrow. Unfortunately, after 7 days of sacrificing creatures daily, Damian still had not received divinity. He is distracted from his grief by a letter that arrives in the mail. It turns out that his regular customer has found the perfect place to find many artifacts. Damian decides it would be a good idea to ask a wealthy client if he could lend him some divinity points. The guy on the other end of the line doesn't understand why such a strong god needs 1 point of divinity, but decides that it's a test. Just a few minutes later, Damian receives a gift. But inside is not what he asked for, but a map to travel to the ruins of the Divine Gorge. The hero decides to explore this place using information on the internet. It turns out that in that world, the mineral reserves of the Earth were depleted. Because of this, that world was poisoned by radiation, and the creatures there began to mutate. Despite this, In that world, one can find gene stones that can be used in the development of creatures. Damian realizes that the client has overestimated his abilities, since he sent an invitation to such a complex world. Despite this, such a journey will definitely bring the hero the necessary money to obtain divinity. Selling radioactive ore is not possible simply because of the danger. But Damian has a decay mechanism. On the same day, the hero finds himself in a city near the ruins of a divine gorge. The city was filled with people from the real world, so Damian put on a mask to hide his identity from everyone. Lost in thought about what to do next, he is surprised when a guy approaches him offering his services as an escort. Damian clears his throat and makes his voice rougher as he asks why he couldn't handle this himself. The guide begins to go on and on, describing all the small situations in which he could be useful, both inside the city and in the dangerous surroundings. The hero barely manages to interrupt the boy's story because he is simply interested in where to get radioactive ore. The guide frowns and decides to recount the recent situation with the man who tried to use the ore. He failed to cope with the evolution of creatures and lost not only his farm, but also all his money and all the animals. Suddenly, another stranger appears in the alley, clearly familiar with the guide. The guy introduces the bald man as the owner of mines that extract radioactive ore. He introduces Damian as an interested buyer. The man is quick to assure that his product is the best on the market. The hero is captivated by his story and asks to give him several samples of the ore to test their effect on the creatures. Upon completion of the transaction, he receives 21 crystals and is quite satisfied with the purchase. However, he decides not to rush to bring something like this to his world, but to test the influence of the ore here. Pretty soon, he finds a wild wolf at the first level of mutation. This beast is already contaminated with radiation, but will be forced to absorb more radiation to maintain life. The hero decides not to waste time on guesses and simply throws one of the radioactive crystals to the wolf. The beast happily begins to lick the stone in front of him. From such a simple contact, within a minute he becomes larger. He grows a horn and saber-like fangs. But then the animal swallows the entire crystal and begins to rapidly evolve up to the third level. Damian is already beginning to dream about how quickly his followers will develop from such doping. But, as if to mock him, the wolf explodes right before his eyes, unable to withstand the level of radiation. This serves as a reminder to the hero to be careful when he bends down to pick up the gene stone. But suddenly someone calls out to him, tearing him away from his thoughts. Imagine Damian's surprise when he finds Mr. Farley standing in front of him, who, moreover, does not recognize him. The man demands that the hero give him all the crystals he has, but he is not going to give up so easily. In response to this, the demigod calls upon his familiars to finally achieve his goal. Several huge wolves begin to rapidly approach the guy, forcing him to back away. The only way to summon your creatures into someone else's space is with a device, so Damian takes the problem into his own hands. He activates his Dark Dragon skill, growing wings and a tail, and charges at the wolves. The hero's aura frightens the animals, so Mr. Farley has to use his skill to make them bolder. The empowered wolves rush to attack again, forgetting their past fear. But to their surprise and disappointment, they are unable to take off after Damian and only growl at him from the ground. But Mr. Farley isn't going to let him get away with it. He activates Divine Shackles, a skill that can make anyone unable to fly. A moment later, Damian falls to the ground right in front of the wolves. He realizes that fighting them on the ground is a bad idea, so he starts running. Along the way, he comes across signs that say that visiting these places is prohibited, but he cannot stop. The wolves are still on his tail and refuse to stop, even sensing the energy in the air. But suddenly the hero raises his head and sees those same terrible mutants that were mentioned in the article about this place. Sensing the alien energy, they immediately rush to attack Damian, despite his threatening aura. He deftly dodges them even without the opportunity to fly away, but finds himself in a situation between a rock and a hard place. Through luck, he finds a gap between the monster's attacks to continue his escape. Instantly, the mutants' attention switches to the wolves, and they begin to destroy the familiars. All this lasts until Mr. Farley intervenes in the fight, throwing punches at the monsters. Unfortunately for him, because of this cat-like activity, he lost track of the boy. Moreover, he instantly senses a threatening energy around him and decides to leave this place. Damian has by this time gotten far enough away from the escape and returns to his human form. But unfortunately, he finds himself in an area far beyond the outlined map. Lost, he continues to encounter mutants. But this time, he decides to use these encounters to his advantage. Damian feeds them crystals to make them exceed their limit. Within moments, his tactics pay off, making the extraction of gene stones much easier than he expected. In a few hours, the sun would set, leaving Damian with the question of finding a place where he could rest. The guy continues to wander through the forest until he sees a strange mountain from which a beam of energy shoots into the sky. The hero understands that there may be ruins in that place, but even there, it will be safer for him to rest than in the forest with mutants. He again takes the form of a dragon and soars into the sky. At the top of the mountain, the hero discovers an abandoned castle that has more or less survived. Damian transforms back into a human and cautiously explores the castle's nooks and crannies for mutants. But what is his surprise when he finds just a pile of paper on the ground, but decides to continue searching. Suddenly, looking around another corner, he discovers some sectarians conducting a ritual. Hiding, he overhears them talking about their master, who sacrificed a lot of money for them to perform the ritual. Having finished drawing the magic circle and placing radioactive crystals on it, the sectarians get down to business. As soon as the moon is directly above the circle, a dense column of Nerigia hits the sky. A magic circle is imprinted on the sky, plunging the sectarians into delight. They decide that they have finally succeeded in beginning to destroy the seal left behind by the ancient civilization. Damian read about this seal and how it protects this world from something terrible. After a few moments of silence, a loud voice is heard, announcing the beginning of the seal being removed. But then a siren sounds and warnings about stopping the process and activating the security system. Suddenly, another voice calls itself the source and offers to play a game. Immediately, everything around becomes silent and changes. The sectarians and Damian find themselves in a strange, empty space. Suddenly, in the distance, they notice a strange figure, almost resembling a human, but as if made of slime. The monster opens its mouth with a slurping sound and explains the conditions of the test. Each of those present will have to raise a 6th-level creature from their familiars. One of the cultists refuses to play by these rules and is going to summon his creatures. But to his horror, he realizes that he is unable to summon his creatures. As punishment for disobedience, the green creature calls Gamora, a huge lizard, who eats the unfortunate dissenter. Damian takes all the cultists by surprise when he asks how they are supposed to develop the creatures if they are not here. The next moment, a portal appears nearby, different from the usual one. The hero understands that this passage is one way. With no way to escape, all the people trapped in this space begin to carry out the task, but fail. Only one hero, using his disintegration machine, successfully uses the purified ore to develop locusts. Millions of locusts were also used to grow one individual, which soon reaches the 3rd level. 3 months later, the cultists still have not achieved much success, but are surprised by Damian's results. Next to him, there appears a huge insect of the 6th level of mutation. The monkey that the sectarians developed turns out to be only of the 4th level and can do nothing to counter the jaws of Gamora. Following the creature, all the sectarians who failed to complete the task also fall into the monster's mouth. After this, the green anthropomorphic creature turns its attention to Damian and his result. The hero spent all the gene stones obtained from the mutants, but still raised one individual to the required level. Of course, due to the instability of the mutation, the locust will only live for a day, and the guy is very sorry about it. But he is confident in the creature's strength and is ready to sacrifice it just to get out of this damned space. The slime creature is also not far behind and commands Gamora to attack. 2 giant creatures clash in battle, dealing significant damage to each other. But only 18 hours later, the giant locust gnaws through the reptile's skull and damages its brain. As a result, the defeated Gamora falls to the ground dead. The slime creature doesn't seem upset at all, but rather congratulates its host on his victory. Only now does Damian guess to ask about the enemy's motivation, because he himself only wanted to get out of here. The slime replies that they will now share one body. After this, streams of slime rush to envelop the hero. Damian feels like he can't breathe, but he can't resist the influence and loses consciousness. After an indefinite period of time, he wakes up and stretches, but does not notice any difference in his condition. The only proof that all the previous events were not a dream is the tablet of his condition. It turns out that a certain source really does live in him now. The creature materializes before him, as if it had just been called, and rejoices that its host has finally awakened. The source claims that Damian should also be happy about this outcome, as he will bring a lot of benefit by sharing his body. The hero refuses to continue the discussion any further because now it is more important for him to get out of this empty space. The source replies that all the conditions for exit were met, and therefore they will return back at any moment. It turns out to be true. The hand moves on its own, snapping its fingers. Immediately, Damian appears back in the ruins. Very inopportunely, the source admits that the destruction of the seals most likely attracted the demigods and gods here. The hero is sure that these people are capable of not only taking away all his property, but also his life. With no other choice, he activates the Blood Arena seal to transport himself there. Within a minute, the deities outside the ruins sense the last seals being lifted and rush inside. But, to their great disappointment, they find no one inside. Only Mr. Farley notices one dead locust, which makes him suspect that it was his old acquaintance. When the king of the gods learns of what happened, he is immediately enraged that someone dared to take his prey. He immediately orders all who serve him to go and search and find what he was looking for, no matter what. Meanwhile, Damian regrets spending money on teleportation when he receives a message from the system. It turns out that he was challenged in the arena, and if he refused 3 times, he would lose the title of heir. The hero is angry that after a dangerous mission he is forced to fight, but still agrees. Arriving in the ring, all he hears is the crowd shouts in support of his opponent, Dragon. The red-haired boy grins as he looks at the Locust King, confident that he will easily win this time. The signal to begin the battle sounds and Damian immediately releases his locusts to attack. Dragon is also not asleep and many half-dragons, his familiars, appear in the ring. The 2 armies clash, but Dragon is not pleased. The guy thinks that Damian thinks he's weak, and that's why he hasn't summoned the evil spirits or other strong followers yet. In response, the hero plops down on the ground, ready to wait for his weak but numerous locusts to kill each of the half-dragons. But it soon becomes clear that defeating Dragon will not be easy, especially when the monsters start using fire against insects. The hero immediately distributes tasks between different types of locusts. Some attack, while others provide protection. For a couple of minutes, everything goes according to plan, and the locusts begin to slowly conquer the battlefield. But then the balance of power returns to its previous position. The locusts begin to die in huge numbers. Dragon only grins wider and suggests that Damian summon stronger creatures, otherwise all his familiars will die. The hero decides that the opponent is right and decides to call upon the heroic forms of the creatures for help. But unexpectedly, the source opposes this idea, because one cannot so blindly indulge the enemy. The creature insists that they can handle it with the locust's power, even when Damian insists otherwise. In response, the source suggests that he use the skill Directed Mutation to see the truth. The hero decides that it is still worth trying, because he will always have time to summon strong followers. He decided to settle on a mutation that increases resistance to damage, so that the fallen locust would protect others. The system offers him several options, but he will have to pay for everything with the lifespan of the locust. Damian decides to give the insects only a day to live, but in return he receives a boost to all of their stats. After use, the level of faith and size of insects increase significantly and they rush to attack. As they get closer to the dragons, they explode among them, causing significant losses to the enemy army. Damian decides not to stop there and also mutates other species of locusts. Mutated specimens begin to shoot stingers at the enemy, immobilizing them for several seconds. Unfortunately for Dragon, even a split-second delay in reaction in such a fierce battle always equals death. The guy still doesn't understand why simple insects suddenly became so strong and demands to call the judge. But Damian isn't done yet. He summons his locust people into the arena, tall creatures with incredibly powerful auras. Each of them wields a bow with such skill that they can easily suppress the enemy, despite their defense. But the hero cleverly adjusts their strategy and orders them to deal with the heroic individuals first. Suddenly, Dragon falls to his knees in tears and begs for mercy for his dragons. The stands are unhappy with this outcome and the money lost on bets, and a smug Damian advises them to be more careful. The system registers his victory, and as a reward, he receives a fragment of the divine core and the seal of the bloody arena. Returning back to his divine space, he builds a bloody arena there to help the evolution of beings. But when he comes to the core, he sees only mountains of ore, fragments, crystals, and Elphys sleeping on top of them. The source materializes again nearby and is amused by Damian's reaction, because together they will achieve much more. The hero replies that he has no time to talk, and he himself thinks about how to get rid of this parasite in his head. Damian performs the sacrifice ritual again, and the system gives him several upgrades to choose from. But he is most interested in creating a golem, because this way he will be able to use the corpse of the giant locust and Gamora. The next 10 days pass in tireless work, but the result leaves the hero very satisfied. In front of him stand several 2-meter-tall golems, covered in dragon scales, sharp teeth, and with sparkling eyes. The guy is surprised that these creatures turned out to be even stronger than some of the heroic forms of creatures. This completes his preparation for entering the academy. Damian is closer than ever to fulfilling his grandfather's request. The journey to the capital takes him 3 whole days, but the grandeur of the Imperial Academy clearly makes up for all the inconveniences. Damian is amazed at how many demigods there are among the ordinary passers-by. He is about to go to the academy to ask where he will live, but suddenly someone calls him by name. Turning around, he sees a man in a suit who introduces himself as his assistant from the academy. Together they board a helicopter, which the academy also organized, to quickly get to the hero's place of residence. After a couple of hours, the helicopter begins to descend towards a huge mansion with vast adjacent territories. The assistant also volunteers to help the hero find his room and asks him to follow him. After inspecting the luxurious furnishings inside the villa, Damian asks about the neighbors, but it turns out that the entire house will be at his disposal. The hero is shocked at how far the academy is willing to go for his comfort, but the assistant hurries away, reminding him of classes tomorrow. Damian decides that there are definitely a lot of geniuses with excellent pedigrees living in such a place and decides to devote some more time to his space. The next day, as he walks through the academy's corridors to his class, all he hears is whispers about the unfairness of his appearance. This makes it clear to him that he should not expect a peaceful study here. Suddenly, a teacher materializes next to him, who, surprisingly, also knows his name. Miss Lena turns out to be a teacher of the preparatory course that Damian will have to attend. She escorts the new student to class and introduces him to the other students. Surprising everyone, Caroline jumps up from her seat, surprised that her former classmate was able to get here too. The whispers begin again, but this time from the girl's admirers, because they decide that they have a rival for her attention. Another student, who is sure that Damian does not deserve his place at the academy, cannot stand it either. Suddenly, the previously smiling teacher casts a withering glance at him and reminds him not to talk until asked. The student, trembling with fear, falls back into his chair and apologizes for his behavior. The friendly expression returns to Lena's face and she asks to ask all questions to Damian personally after the lesson. In a quieter voice, the student declares that he is ready to see for himself whether Damian is worthy of studying with them. He challenges the hero, but he refuses without even thinking. In response, the student calls him a coward, obviously provoking him. The other students also begin to support him. Unexpectedly, it is Caroline who stops the conflict and reminds that the guy has done nothing wrong to anyone here. But as soon as the classes are over, Dolan and his henchmen approach the hero again to continue sorting things out. Once again, Caroline tries to interrupt their attempt and is even ready to defend the guy with her own strength in a duel. But here Damian can no longer stand it. He decides to stop the attacks against him once and for all. Walking around the girl, he directly asks why Dolan got so angry with him on the very first day. The student comes closer to the hero and states that he has no right to study at the academy, and that he got his place through fraud. Unfazed by the witness, the boys declare that they will beat and humiliate Damian until he simply gives in and leaves. The hero is amused by their determination and he asks Caroline just in case whether they are her friends. After receiving a negative answer, he moves closer to the bullies to teach them a lesson. The girl begins to worry about him and tells him that Olena has elite knights as familiars, who are too tough even for her. But, having received the hero's calm look in response, she backs down and gives him the freedom to act as he wants. Dolan and his henchmen look at the two of them with puzzled looks, because they are sure that even one familiar would be enough to crush Damian. But they decide to play by the rules and take the battle to the arena. Arriving at the arena, the hero decides to try out one of the unfamiliar battle modes to check out the new type of creatures in action. After completing the preparation, both he and his opponent are thrown into the arena. Dolan begins calling his knights with a smug grin, confident that Damian hadn't even thought about what he had agreed to. The hero merely summons a dozen half-dragons, interrupting him mid-sentence. Their appearance takes the guy by surprise because the enemy obviously summoned heroes, but the creatures in front of him are clearly stronger, judging by the aura. But, not daring to lose face in front of Caroline, he calls upon his steel knights of the rank of Lord. Meanwhile, everyone else watches the battle. Caroline is surprised at how quickly Damian has such powerful creatures. One of the students reads the characteristics of the half-dragons. He is sure that the hero will be defeated by the man-made creatures. The others pick up on his thought, confident that Damian simply bought these creatures but doesn't even know their characteristics. Caroline decides to keep to herself that the guy hasn't had a family for a long time, and he definitely didn't buy the golems because he doesn't have money. Meanwhile, the signal to begin the battle sounds and Dolan orders his knights to attack. The knights easily reach the half-dragons, and they do not even resist or retreat. Dolan is already beginning to celebrate his victory, hearing the sounds of metal hitting living bodies. But when the veil of enchantment falls, He notices that his army does not cause any damage to Damian's creatures. But he is even more surprised by the force with which the half-dragons attack when the hero allows them to act. With each blow of their clawed paws, the half-dragons push the steel knights further and further back. The students are shocked that someone can actually resist such powerful creatures of Elena. Having established his superiority, Damian decides to give the guy a chance to retreat and stop the fight. But Dolan, driven by the idea of victory, assures that he has not yet shown even half of his strength and orders the knights to unite. The hero is simply amused by this technology, which reminds him of the cartoons of his childhood. The knights, meanwhile, begin to embrace each other, merging thanks to magic. A minute later, a giant colossus steps into the arena, emitting an aura much stronger than the heroic form. The next moment, the giant robot rushes to attack the 10 half-dragons. His fist now had the strength of 10, and it was simply impossible to withstand such an attack. Having regained the advantage in the fight, Dolan suggests that Damian surrender and begins the 10-second countdown. The hero decides to help him count faster and asks him to quickly continue the battle further. Dolan, confident of his victory, commands his knights to continue, but he is interrupted mid-sentence by an unusual sight. The half-dragons, who had been severely damaged by the knights' attacks just a moment ago, began to regenerate very quickly. After this, Damian's army launches a counterattack on the giant colossus with incredible speed. The giant manages to throw back only one, but at the same time the other 9 bite into his iron armor and tear it. Their jaws chew through metal as easily as meat, causing significant damage to the knight. After a few minutes of fruitless struggle, the bitten-off iron head falls at Dolan's feet. The guy understands that the battle is over and falls to his knees in despair and helplessness. Damian emerges from the arena portal with a smug grin from his victory. But he is not met with applause and indignation, but with pure surprise from all the students who watch the battle. Suddenly, the hero is hugged by an unknown thug who mentions his recommendation to the academy. This is the only clue Damian has as to who this guy really is: Vincent Hicks. They had encountered him not long ago in the same arena, but there he had used a different appearance to look more impressive. The students overhear their conversation and realize that they were wrong about Damian and his abilities. Vincent promises that anyone who has a grudge against his friend will have to deal with him personally. After this, the big guy takes the hero away to introduce him to his friends, senior students. Having climbed several floors on the stairwell, they meet a guy and a girl. The guy's name is Bradley, and the girl's name is Jenny. They both have heard about Damian's victory in the arena against Vincent. The hero admits that it was not so much a matter of the difference in strength as it was a matter of luck. But the girl assures that luck plays a significant role and tells about the upcoming test for students involving the dead. It turns out that they would like to ask him for help, and Damian has no idea why the demigods need a newbie in this matter. But in response, the senior students only laugh because they definitely don't consider him to be one. Jenny explains that zombies are only allowed into the city during the preparatory course because it is a low-level space. Vincent claims that it would have taken him just a few hours to raise the entire city to the ground. The girl continues that they need the fruit of wisdom from that space. It gives intellect, and they are ready to pay with divinity. Damian is incredibly happy with the offer, but tries to appear professional by agreeing. In return, Jenny gives the hero some plant seeds, which, according to her, will be very useful to him. Back home, researching information for the upcoming test, Damian is incredibly happy that he talked to the teacher. Lena said that it is possible to initiate conversion to a demigod with 6 points of divinity, but it will not be as effective. She advises him not to waste his potential in this way, but to continue accumulating divinity points. A few days later, the entire preparatory course is buzzing with news of the upcoming competition in the zombie city. Unexpectedly, Dolan offers Damian a bet on the duration of this task. The plan is that whoever gets the lowest score will have to stop communicating with Caroline forever. The hero is only irritated by this and suggests that the guy simply forget about the girl who is not interested in him. But Dolan replies that he is ready to do anything, just to protect all rivals from the girl. Caroline herself overhears their conversation and asks Damian to accept the student's bet. The hero glances at her and asks her not to blame him for the loss, but the girl is confident in his victory. Lena is more than happy to fill you in on all the details of the zombie city mission, and reveals that the only goal is survival. With a snap of his fingers, he instantly transfers the entire preparatory course to the streets of a gloomy city. The bodies of the students turned from immortal to mortal, and everyone instantly felt a wild hunger. Being deities, they don't particularly care about food. But given the task at hand, it's no surprise that such an advantage was taken away from them. But, at least the organizers left the students with their talents and abilities, for which Damian is very grateful to them. He decides to go explore the city and invites Catherine to join him. The girl summons her Thunderbird and invites the hero to jump on the animal. But he only replies that he has his wings and activates the transformation into a black dragon. After this, the two of them set off to explore the location they found themselves in. Having flown around the entire city, they finally land on one of the streets. Damian is genuinely surprised that there are restaurants, hotels, and much more here, despite the zombie invasion. Seeing one of these establishments nearby, they decide to go inside and have a bite to eat. They are greeted by the tavern owner, and Damian decides to immediately admit that they have no money, since they have just arrived. There was no need to wait for a reaction. The man snatches a gun from under the bar counter and chases them away. Caroline is not used to such treatment and is ready to start a conflict, but the hero reminds that they are now mortal, and they need to act differently. He remembers in time about the seeds that Jenny gave him and decides to test them for usefulness. The tavern owner's face immediately changes when he sees the golden seed. In an unctuous voice, he offers to buy it from them for $10. But Damian only asks to exchange dinner and answers to questions for their seed. The old man immediately agrees. In the blink of an eye, the heroes find themselves at a table laden with food. While they eat, Damian decides to ask the man about what is happening in their city. He happily talks about his city, where zombies and people have learned to live with each other. Residents kill zombies in exchange for resources and money. Every night the streets are filled with the dead. Zombies kill civilians to become stronger at the expense of their brains. Residents also often use not only cold or firearms but also magical plants. Damian just happens to have a seed of one of these plants, and the old man is very eager to buy one for himself. After finishing her meal, Caroline wonders where people usually get such seeds and plants. The tavern owner complains that there are seeds on the market, but they are very expensive. But you can also get them by killing zombies. The hero decides that they don't have the luxury of fighting monsters yet, and is going to go in search of a place to stay for the night. The old man sees their interest and advises them to contact the mayor about buying a house, or as a last resort, rent a room in a hotel. Soon, they leave the establishment and head in the direction indicated by the old man, where the mayor lives. Looking back a couple of meters later, Damian noticed a boy who decided to eat in the tavern. Unfortunately for him, he is not greeted with a hot dinner, but with a shot in the arm. For such an inept action, the student receives a penalty of points and falls to the bottom of the ranking. It didn't take much effort to get to the mayor's house. The heroes decide to sell the seeds to him in order to immediately exchange them for housing. It turns out that Caroline is only a little short of a separate home, and Damian agrees to give her the missing amount. Having heard them, the mayor suggests that they buy one big house for the two of them, because that way they can even save money. This proposal really interests the guy and the girl. What attracts them most is the appearance of the house and the swimming pool on the property. They are already ready to buy this housing, but suddenly the mayor informs that this is not possible. By law, only spouses are allowed to live under the same roof in the city. Therefore, the only option for the heroes to get such a mansion is marriage. The mayor is offended that the heroes thought things would turn out differently. He is determined to preserve the traditions of his city and not allow debauchery. Caroline blushes and shyly replies that they are not even dating. But Damian persistently convinces her that the marriage will be only for the sake of the house. The girl agrees, and hugging for greater persuasiveness, they both ask for a contract to sign. The mayor assures them that they are a wonderful couple and gives them the papers to register their marriage and buy a house. After signing the contract, the man happily hands them the keys to the house and a handful of seeds for basic protection. As they walk towards the house, Caroline continues to tell Damian not to imagine anything unnecessary because it's all fiction. Because they both have already purchased real estate and become citizens of the city, the system awards them 1,000 points each. The mansion they bought turns out to be truly enormous. But the girl does not share Damian's delight, because for her, this is usual. Once inside, she immediately heads upstairs to rest until nightfall. Meanwhile, the hero decides to work a little on protecting the house and studying what plants are capable of. Later in the evening, he looks with satisfaction at the plants, which have already managed to grow significantly. His self-talk is interrupted by Caroline, who has already rested and decided to check on the preparations. Suddenly, the heroes hear an unfamiliar noise that is getting closer and closer. It's pitch black all around, so Caroline decides to use one of her lighting spells. Her magic reveals a crowd of zombies rapidly approaching them. The dead move awkwardly, limping, but it is obvious that the monsters are determined to get what they want. The plants immediately react to their approach, and Damian can't wait to see them in action. A moment later, the flowers begin a massive attack on the invaders. But unfortunately, their attacks are too weak to do any harm to the zombies. Damian realizes that this won't work and decides to strengthen the plants with the attribute of darkness. This boost increases the speed and attack power of the P by tens of times. Now attacks do much more damage and a few hits are enough to kill first-order zombies. But soon Damian encounters another problem. The attribute of darkness threatens a lot of his energy, and with his current body he will not be able to strengthen all the plants. In addition to the immediate danger, Caroline reveals that Dolan already has both a house and 1,300 points, overtaking the hero. The guy decides that he needs to find a more effective way to kill zombies and thinks about strengthening plants. After a moment, he comes to the conclusion that flowers are also susceptible to mutation, and so decides to try to change their genome. When activating the skill, the system gives various options for developing a mutation that enhances attacks or the flower itself. The hero likes all the options, and therefore decides to apply all the mutations available for immediate use. Immediately, the appearance of the plants began to change, and the power of attacks suddenly jumped to incredible levels. Under their attack, a huge number of zombies die in a matter of minutes, and the road leading to the mansion becomes empty. But here, zombies much stronger than the previous ones come into play. The massive standard-bearer zombie takes a swing and throws the flag like a spear towards the villa. It was lucky that his aim was thrown off by the numbness of his limbs, and his throw did not cause any damage to the flowers. In addition, during the attack, it opens up to the P, which immediately begins a massive shooting. Damian, meanwhile, collects the spoils of war. The banner turns out to be made of interesting steel, which may come in handy later. While he was busy with the warring plants, he completely forgot about the money flowers. Hoping to make up for the omission, he also subjects them to all available mutations. Caroline happily shouts that the hero managed to beat Dolan in terms of points. On the other side of town, a student notices this too and takes out the dragonflower seeds to make sure he surpasses Damian. After 2 hours of sprinkling over the plant, the flower takes the shape of a dragon, which is connected to the ground by a small stem. Once the flower finishes ripening, it will immediately attack any nearby zombie with a stream of fire. In an instant, dozens of zombies turn to ashes. Dolan watches with satisfaction as his point score rapidly increases, moving him further away from Damian in the rankings. He learned that the hero was an orphan and intended to show him why he shouldn't rush into battle with such a strong opponent. Meanwhile, morning comes and the bright sun sets fire to the evil spirits, ridding the streets of their putrid smell. After the victory, the enemies leave behind mountains of gold and artifacts. Caroline rejoices at their small victory, but it turns out that even after such a battle, they are still behind first place. Damian assures her that they have plenty of time, and with such wealth they will buy better seeds. Later in the evening, he can't help but notice how much more confident he feels under the protection of such plants. But Caroline asks him not to rejoice too early, because it is not ordinary zombies that are attacking them. Sure enough, on the road leading to the villa, zombie knights and the dance king of the third and fourth order are approaching them. Damian remembers that zombies are primarily attracted to light and asks the girl to turn off the lights in the entire house. Within a few minutes, the entire lawn in front of the house is plunged into darkness. The friends look around the corner with relief and discover that the monsters have safely made their way to Madame Sal's house. But Damian is most interested in the dancing king who left first. Now he can lure the others back. Caroline casts the light source spell to make the front lawn illuminated again. The zombies that didn't manage to get far enough immediately turn around and go back to the hero's house. Knights fight ahead of everyone else because they are horsemen. Their approach immediately activates the P's defense mechanism. Their strength is quite enough to stop the small zombies that are walking just behind. But the zombie knights are unaffected by their attacks, and one is already close enough to attack Caroline. Luckily for her, a broccoli defender came to her defense, sending the knight flying with one blow. Meanwhile, Damian checks the rankings and is surprised that another classmate of his has already managed to rise to third place. It turns out that Jared had charmed Madame Sal and decided to use her home and protection to climb that high. The woman's house begins to be attacked by zombie pole vaulters, who simply jump over the first line of defense. But they are immediately noticed by the second line of defense, the oak snipers. Zombies cannot withstand the attack of such strong plants and cannot escape, and therefore die immediately after landing. Jared is overjoyed because he doesn't even have to do anything for the glasses to fall into his pocket. Damian looks with disgust at the gigolo, who didn't even put in any effort to get third place. Caroline hears a hint of envy in his words, and the guy immediately advises her to focus on getting first place. The Dance King at this time tirelessly summons other zombie dancers who will serve as his protection. Together with them, he goes to Jared's house. The two zombies walking ahead attract all the attacks to themselves. Soon the Dancing King successfully breaks through the defenses right to Madame Sal's house. But, unexpectedly for himself, he steps on a barely noticeable bump on the tile of the path. It turns out that it was a special trap that throws him away from the yard. Damian was about to praise his neighbor's intelligence, but the trajectory of the Dance King brings him straight to the guy's own lawn. He immediately commands all his fighting peas to attack the zombie that has appeared. The plants begin a massive barrage of fire on this particular zombie, but they are unable to even hold it in place. It makes sense that their attacks don't even do any damage to him. He's too high level for them. Caroline panics and suggests hiding in the house, but the hero knows that there is no point in doing so if the defense is breached. He takes the form of a black dragon to help his plants deal with the attacker. Concentrating all his strength into his fist, he delivers a blow to the zombies that would normally kill the monsters in one attempt. But, unfortunately, the Dance King not only withstands the attack, but also continues to advance. But the hero refuses to give up and delivers 1,000 lightning strikes to the 4th level zombie. With this technique, he finally managed to defeat the enemy. But the rewards clearly don't seem to be appropriate for such a boss. For defeating a level 4 zombie, he gets only 500 points, a skill, a seed, and boots. At this time, the students of the academy are watching him, surprised by his incredible strength. Jenny uses binoculars to watch the broadcast of the test in the teacher's room. Vincent is not surprised that the one who defeated him joined forces with the strongest student in the preparatory course. But Jenny reminds them that their goal is the fruit of wisdom and hopes that Damian has enough intelligence. The girl jokes that she is even ready to set up Vincent for teacher Lena in order to watch the broadcast without fear. Out of nowhere, the teacher herself, who overheard her opinion about herself, materializes nearby and demands an explanation. The students prefer to remain silent, and then Lena decides to ask who the 3 seniors are rooting for. They timidly answer that they are watching Damian. Hearing their answer, Lena unexpectedly agrees to take them to the teacher's room. Its resolution came at just the right time. The broadcast just conveys the hero's fierce fight with the zombies. He fights the zombie knight with his own hands, holding him in place. He easily destroys the zombie's defense, so that the next moment it is completely open to an attack by peas. Only now do the seniors realize that Damian's plants have been significantly strengthened, both in terms of resistance and strength. But Jenny is more surprised that the guy is already being attacked by zombies of such a high level, although it should have been a maximum of the second. While they were discussing this, they noticed a zombie from Madame Sal's plot being thrown by a spring trap onto Damian's plot. The seniors agree that this is all an unfair fight, but the guy can still successfully withstand their attacks. Teacher Lena also mentions that the hero fights solely with his own strength, without the support of local residents. At the same time, the broadcast shows Jared, who openly took advantage of the resident in order to do nothing. As a result, Damian ends up in second place, and while everything is clear with Jared, Dolan raises questions. The broadcast shows a guy, and on his lawn there are dragon plants that easily burn zombies. The seniors immediately guess that the guy was supported by their friend Elijah, who himself once succeeded in Zombie City. Teacher Lena confirms their assumption. It turns out that the guy agreed to help the newcomer in training in exchange for resources from the city. The guys agree among themselves that this is not fair, and certainly does not show the true strengths of the new students. Suddenly, Elijah himself, who had overheard their indignation, approaches them from behind. After seeing the broadcast, he offers a bet on the results of the challenge and who will take first place. Vincent frowns at this proposal because everyone already knows about his agreement with Dolan, who is now in first place. Elijah calls them cowards for this and for not thinking of doing the same for the sake of victory and profit. Vincent almost snaps at him, although he sees that this is just a provocation to his emotions. Jenny only replies that they are only interested in helping talented students from poor families and not in their own interests. She also states that they are not afraid to argue. This answer already satisfies Elijah more. He offers 10 divinity points as a bet, and Jenny, in the heat of the argument, agrees to such terms. Elijah appoints teacher Lena as the guarantor of the payment so that no one will back out. When he leaves, Vincent immediately voices his concerns, but the girl confidently replies that the guy will definitely win. Teacher Lena suggests that they just hope that Damian can solve the mystery of the zombie city in order to get to the fruit of wisdom. The second day of survival in Zombie City begins, and the hero, after a sleepless night, simply falls off his feet. Caroline thanks him for his efforts and begins sorting through the things she was given for defeating the zombies. Damian, teasing her, calls her wifey and asks her to sort everything out. As expected, he gets hit in response by her. Meanwhile, Jared is watching them and advises them to look at the student rankings. Caroline is horrified to discover that Damian is now only in third place behind Jared and Olena. But the hero does not remain in debt and begins to mock the guy for parasitizing the old woman out of his own weakness. This attack touches Jared to the quick and reminds him of the spring traps that will continue to throw enemies to Damian today. This situation does not frighten the hero, but quite the opposite. But then he is distracted by something in the pile of treasures. Both seeds turn out to be quite strong plants, even of the fourth order. Caroline, meanwhile, has selected the unnecessary items and suggests going to the merchant to sell them. After an hour, they get rid of almost everything except the tap dance skill, which dropped from the Dancing King. The skill turned out to be useless, in the merchant's opinion, but for everything else, the guys received a decent amount of money. They decide to sell the banner to the mayor on the advice of the same merchant, because the man loves collecting such artifacts. The mayor takes them to a vast armory, where he offers Damian his choice of anything in exchange for the banner. A few minutes later, the hero sees a seemingly ordinary sword, but he is insatiably drawn to it. But the man replies that one banner will not be enough for such an item. Damian, without hesitation, offers fourth order seeds as payment, and the mayor is quite satisfied with this payment. He also advises to offer the skill tap dance to Madame Sal, because in her youth she was the queen of dancing in the city. On the way home, they pass by Olen's house, whose plot is tirelessly guarded by dragon plants. The guy approaches the hero and suggests that he surrender, because the gap between them in the rating will only grow. But Damian decides to ignore Olena and asks his wife to move on and not pay attention to the crazy people. The guy is irritated not so much by the ignoring, but by the nickname for Caroline, and all talk of resolving the conflict comes to naught. He is so infuriated by this attitude that he promises himself that he will destroy any chances of success with Damian. A couple of minutes later, the boys arrive at Madame Sal's house. The woman comes out with her lover, Jared, and greets her neighbor. She assumes that Damian has come for compensation, but immediately warns that he will not pay for any damage. But the hero assures that he came for a completely different reason, because he found a special artifact for Madame Sal. She looks at the guy skeptically, confident that he won't be able to bribe her. But when Damian demonstrates the tap dance skill tutorial, her face changes dramatically. Jared ignores the woman's reaction and immediately declares that they will not be appeased with some book. But Madame Sal is unable to contain her admiration for the textbook and says that she is ready to give anything for it. Jared instantly realizes how precarious his position is, because the woman won't blink an eye if asked to kick him out. He immediately tries to smooth over the conflict with Damian and reminds him that they still have many years to study together. But unexpectedly for him, Damian gives the textbook away just like that and promises that if anything happens, he will bring something similar to her right away. Madame Sal asks him to forgive her for her previous rudeness and asks him to call her Hannah from now on. And with that, they say goodbye, leaving Jared in shock. As a reward for his friendship with Madame Sal, the system rewards Damian with access to her store and 30,000 rating points. Caroline also receives a reward, although less than the hero, because she did nothing significant except for the alliance with him. He decides to check out Madame Sal's shop without leaving home. The currency in the shop turns out to be friendship points with Madame herself. Damian can also buy a fruit of wisdom, but decides to put it off for now. Among the treasures dropped by the monsters, there are also seeds of fourth-order plants, which he decides to plant. The first line of defense is the explosive corns, which attack zombies with bolts of energy. Once they reach their target, a powerful explosion occurs, damaging a huge number of enemies. Damian is also unaccustomed to the fact that among the monsters today, there are no high-level zombies, only weaklings. It turns out that Madame Sal removed all the springs so that they would no longer cause problems for the hero. Since the house will now be safe, Damian decides to take a walk and takes the form of a dark dragon for this purpose. He also decided to do this in order to gain rating points for defeating a large number of enemies. It will also be a great opportunity for him to try out his sword. Having burst into a crowd of zombies, he manages to kill every zombie in his path with one blow. Points start to add up to his rating quickly, but not fast enough, so Damian decides to find stronger enemies. 4 hours later, dawn comes and all the zombies begin to disappear from the city streets. The gap between third, second, and first place has significantly narrowed, which cannot but please the hero. On the third day of survival, the system rewards each remaining student with an additional portion of points. Tired, Damian returns home, only to find one of the townspeople on his lawn. The man, seeing him, happily runs up and says hello, introducing himself as Rick Grimes, captain of the city guard. He came to offer the hero a position in the ranks of the guards to protect the city from monsters above the 5th level. Damian realizes that he has a golden ticket to first place in the rankings and asks to be accepted as a guard. Rick Grimes replies that this is why he came to the hero and welcomes him as the defender of the city. For befriending the captain of the guard and joining their ranks, the system awards Damian a total of 110,000 points. This immediately propels him to the top of the rankings, leaving Dolan and Jared behind. With this, he says goodbye to Rick, promising to meet him at sunset. Before Damian has time to digest the meeting, Caroline, who has already managed to check the rating, rushes to him with congratulations. The hero is taken aback by her warm greeting, but their sweet moment is interrupted by a knock on the door. Opening the door, he finds a girl standing on the threshold who is impressed by his actions the previous night. Damian doesn't recognize her, and the girl is in no hurry to get acquainted, only looking at him with interest. Her increased attention makes even Caroline come to the door to ask what the hero did at night. The stranger notices her, asking why they live together, and the girl proudly calls herself Damian's wife. The blonde turns her gaze back to the hero and assures him that she is even ready to become his lover, and finally says that her name is Jessica. With this, she says goodbye, promising to meet before sunset, since they are now together in the ranks of the city guard. Caroline immediately demands a detailed explanation of whether Damian really left her home yesterday to meet Jessica. The hero sincerely replies that the blonde used such words on purpose, and that he actually killed zombies. He gives her a bag of seeds so that she can protect the house herself, because today, he himself will go with the guards to kill strong zombies. A day passes and Damian comes to the designated place, where he notices a group of guards with weapons at the ready. Jessica immediately sticks to his hand and complains that she missed him very much. Her colleagues immediately try to pull her up short. Among them is Giant Hammer Johnson. Knight Malcolm assesses the hero and asks him to tell about his greatest strengths. But instead of words, Damian decides to demonstrate his ability to transform into a black dragon. Jessica is delighted with his skill and asks the captain to pair them up. Rick initially planned to just show the guy the essence of the work, but decides to let him into battle, but under the supervision of the blonde. The girl takes out 2 pistols and behind her appear 2 fifth-order plants, a flame shooter and a frost shooter. Even Damian notices the approaching ominous aura of the dead. Other guardians also call upon their plants for protection. Johnson merges with his hazel and immediately his strength increases significantly. Malcolm summons a gladiolus and a pine tree that merge with his sword and spear. After merging with his plant, Captain Rick becomes covered in armor and blue flames. He becomes the first to rush into attack, soaring into the air. Jessica joins him, firing explosive bullets at the approaching zombies. Johnson also attacks zombies with his giant hammer. But suddenly the monster doesn't fall dead. Its head splits open and thorn-covered vines sprout from it. Captain Rick immediately comes to the rescue, burning the zombies with his blue flame. Damian, meanwhile, watches the guards with admiration, but decides that it is time for him to accept the fight. He lunges forward and delivers a blow enhanced by all of his skills, which usually kills the zombie on the first try. But suddenly Jessica rushes towards him. After knocking him to the ground, she shoots the zombie, who turns out to have survived the hero's attack. Luckily, her shots are powerful enough to kill the creature. The girl asks not to underestimate the fifth-order zombies because they are much more resilient than those Damian dealt with. The hero thanks her for her help, and the girl with a serious face asks him to stay closer to her and not to act like a hero. She herself immediately rushes back into battle. Thanks to her abilities, she doesn't even have to aim with her eyes. Damian hangs back a little, finishing off those who aren't finished off by Jessica's attacks. After 3 hours of non-stop fighting, the hero stops transforming and looks exhausted. Meanwhile, the city's guards show no sign of fatigue, repelling attacks from high-level zombies with the same zeal. Jessica notices his condition and jokes that with such endurance he has no place on their team. Damian is obviously offended by her joke and tries to find a reason other than his mortal body why he got tired so quickly. Suddenly, a voice from a source that has not shown any signs of presence for a long time sounds in his head. The creature also heard mockery towards its carrier, and its pride did not allow it to remain on the sidelines. Promising to fix everything, the source removes the gene lock that was holding Damian's true abilities back. The next moment, the guy's body is filled with a huge amount of energy, as if the floodgates of a dam had been opened. The source says that Damian could now acquire some mutations if he receives the genes of a strong creature. He remembers how the Guardians merged with plants and decides to try to do the same with the seed of the incinerating sunflower. As soon as the seed enters Damian's mouth, his genes immediately begin to merge with the hero's cells. His body begins to glow, as if a second sun had appeared, illuminating almost the entire city. Naturally, such a bright light cannot but affect the zombies, who until this moment were enjoying the darkness of the streets. When exposed to sunlight, their bodies begin to burn, and weaker zombies turn into dust. Although the guards did not understand what Damian was doing, Rick decides that this is a good time for a successful counterattack. Zombies, who from the very beginning fought with people almost on equal terms, now die from one blow. But a level 6 zombie appeared, not so affected by the sunlight. Becoming enraged, he rushes at the hero. Captain Rick immediately orders the others to protect Damian. Johnson appears nearby and immediately attacks the target. Unfortunately, the giant level 6 zombie turns out to be no easy opponent and simply knocks the man away with one blow. The captain immediately changes strategy, assessing the danger, and orders Damian to run while they all work together to distract the monster. But the guy doesn't move from his place despite the order. Instead of running away, he spreads his arms out to the sides and approaches the giant zombie. Once he gets close enough to the monster, the heat from his body reaches its peak, incinerating the monster. The city guards are delighted with the rookie's victory over such a big guy. Under their cries of praise, the system reports on the friendship level with them and the rating points awarded. At the same time, the voice of the source is heard again, timidly announcing the payment for removing the gene lock. Damian immediately says that he will not pay for anything, but the creature interrupts him, because we are talking about side effects. Seeing the horrified expression on the hero's face, the source hastens to warn that this is not about physical phenomena. It turns out that due to the weakness of the guy's body, he can only remove the genetic lock once every 10 days, because the skill needs to recover. If Damian violates this condition, his mutations may become permanent and harmful. The guy replies that he is definitely not interested in such a thing. Having dealt with the rest of the zombies nearby, the guards rush to talk to him about his abilities. Jessica rushes to him with hugs and offers to celebrate his first successful hunt for such strong zombies together. Johnson interrupts their conversation and suggests that Damian go and rest, since the other zombies were also damaged by the outbreak. At this point, the hero says goodbye to the guys, promising to join them tomorrow. On his way home, he ponders how to improve his skills. He eventually stops at his new friend's shops. The points earned for starting the friendship are enough for several items, and Damian spends several hours choosing the best combination. It's not without the source's comments when a guy decides to buy the ability to merge with plants, like the guards. In exchange, the creature offers to develop the hero's merging skill by several levels for a few divinity points. Having received a categorical refusal, the source gets angry but offers a lower price. Feigning disinterest, Damian sighs but agrees to the source's terms. Immediately, an improved version of merging with plants appears in the hero's head. Instead of one plant, it can now merge with 3 at once, and even with plants of the 6th order. Damian spends the rest of the night merging with plants and exploring new powers and abilities. When dawn comes, he is given, as usual, a few thousand points for surviving the night. Returning home, he finds Caroline distributing the zombie artifacts she had obtained between bags. Irritated, she throws his share at him and announces that he will sell it himself. But the guy just refuses his share with a satisfied face because he doesn't need it anymore. The girl tells him to mind his own business while she goes to Madame Sal's dance lesson to make friends with her. After 9 days, the heroes had already established a kind of routine. Every sunset, Damian comes to help the guards with their work of clearing the zombie horde of the strongest specimens. But this time he can't help but notice the depressed mood of the group. Jessica explains that it is because of the lunar eclipse that will happen today. At this time, zombies are unusually ferocious and strong. During the last eclipse, one of the guards died, and Captain Rick still cannot forgive himself for it. Jessica asks Damian to run away if things get too dangerous. He is the weakest among them now, and therefore may die first. But the hero is not going to stand aside and wait for defeat. He opens a store to properly prepare. Damian understands that he is about to take part in an important event, and therefore does not hesitate to spend all his points on the finishing move. Among other things, he bought dragon grass. After eating it, his body becomes covered with dark veins. The dragon blood genes obviously react to this herb, and the hero's transformation is stronger than before. Soon, the initially bright moon begins to fade. The city streets are plunged into darkness. A lunar eclipse occurs. As soon as zombies find themselves under the moon during an eclipse, they begin to behave strangely. Their previously weak shells are torn. In their place, individuals appear that are much stronger and more aggressive than those that were. Rick watches as the zombies growling at the moon only get stronger and orders his team to prepare for a tough fight. The rest of the boys take on their battle form, merging with the protective plants, and wait for instructions. Having grown to incredible proportions, an army of zombies rushes into battle, trying to break into the city. Rick is the first to greet them, scorching a crowd of 5-level zombies with streams of blue flame. Another 5th-tier zombie is under a non-stop barrage of exploding bullets. Jessica is a skilled duel wielder, with the elemental difference helping to deal additional damage to the monster. Johnson also helps her by keeping the zombies at a comfortable shooting distance. Damian decides not to stand aside, but to rush into battle, taking advantage of his advantage: flight. Thanks to the extra boost, this time even a level 5 zombie can't withstand his blow. The hero also did not neglect physical training all these days. That's why, when a crowd of zombies surrounds him, he deftly kicks them back to finish them off with his sword. Rick is impressed by his technique and now feels more comfortable leaving the newbie on the battlefield. Together, in perfect synergy, the guards fight for an hour. But as the lunar eclipse intensifies, the zombies also become stronger. The captain soon realizes that they cannot hold out for long and asks Jessica to go to the mayor for help. The girl obeys the command and runs into the city, apologizing that she is forced to leave her friends without her help. With her disappearance, the situation on the battlefield becomes even more critical for the guards, especially Malcolm. Johnson immediately takes his place, keeping the zombies from attacking the knight. Rick comes to the rescue and finishes off the giant monster with one blow. Just at this time, Damian receives a notification from the system that he can once again access the gene lock. He flies to the remaining guards and announces that he will buy them a little time until help arrives. To be on the safe side, he also uses an aurora seed, which can contain the death energy of zombies. As soon as the boy absorbs the seed, the genetic lock immediately opens, releasing his full power. His body begins to emit bright rays of light, and vines burst out of his body, which immediately attack the zombies below. An hour later, dozens of 5-level individuals were chopped into pieces and burned by incinerating rays. Although the hero is exhausted from the endless struggle, he is ready to continue even at the limits of his strength in order to gain more time. But there is no need for this anymore. The reinforcement team brought by Jessica arrives in time. Among them, there is even the mayor himself, who runs out ahead of everyone to help. But Captain Rick suddenly asks everyone to stop, because he senses a serious danger nearby. The mayor takes out his binoculars, and behind the crowd of arriving zombies, he sees a thick fog that is floating towards the city. The captain of the guard is afraid that fighting in the fog will become several times more difficult and asks about plants that can help. The man immediately takes out a wind-blowing clover seed and plants it in a pot instead of the ground under his feet. Suddenly, the plant produces its first sprout and begins to grow in size very quickly and unnaturally. Within a couple of seconds, giant windblowers are working towards the zombies, driving away the fog behind them. Damian decides to use the Eye of Identification and discovers that the flower pots are artifacts that accelerate plant growth. The mayor hears the guy's admiration and promises that he will sell him a couple of the same ones when they return, because everyone already knows about his feat. The system unexpectedly informs Damian about the beginning of a friendship with the mayor and gives him 100,000 rating points. He also now has access to the mayor's shop, which sells very useful items and plants. Among them, the guy discovers the mushroom Black Death, which has a particularly strong effect on zombies, infecting them with spores. Damian uses the power of the windblowers to throw the mushrooms further into the zombie army. The mushrooms immediately begin to spread spores throughout the zombie army, which was part of the hero's plan. Since mushrooms are also living creatures, he is going to sacrifice them in order to receive a bonus from the system. After this, the mushrooms on the zombies' bodies turn into streams of energy, merging into a single magic circle. The next moment, Damian is presented with 3 options for repaying his sacrifice. He decides to choose a golden flower pot because it can be combined with mutation and immortality. Meanwhile, the mayor warns of a new wave of zombies approaching the city. The hero decides that he urgently needs to start mutating the mushroom and plants it in a small pot. Among the mutations are an increase in the number of spores, an increase in their activity, and an acceleration of growth. Damian takes all the improvements. After this, he grabs one of the windblowers and places it behind the mushroom. The sky is covered with a cloud of spores from this mushroom, which is rushing straight towards the army of zombies. Rick immediately notices that the monsters have become slower. The city's residents cannot contain their happiness, but it is too early to rejoice. Mir warns that the eclipse will soon enter its final phase and the zombies will become even more dangerous. Under the influence of the moon's powers, zombies take on an even more monstrous form and become even stronger. The mayor, seeing this, immediately orders everyone to retreat immediately in order to concentrate the defense on the main gate. Damian, meanwhile, continues to fight monsters, using his flight skill to get all the bonuses for killing. He was busy hunting when a long vine appeared from the fog at the speed of light and, wrapping itself around his body, pulled him into the fog. Jessica wants to run after him, but Rick stops her in time. He believes that they will still have a chance to get the guy back. Damian, meanwhile, finds a way to tear the vines off himself and uses his wings to drive away the approaching zombies. He takes off into the air and sees a city in the distance, even through the thick fog. He decides to fly back the same way to get out. But after an hour of flying, he still hasn't reached the city, and ahead he sees only an endless army of evil spirits. The source is quick to suggest that the guy has been trapped, but agrees to help only for a divinity point. But Damian has nothing more to give to the creature except his own life. The source accepts his refusal, but takes pity and suggests that it will not be possible to wait out the fog, because time has stood still here. The hero understands that no matter which way he flies, he will not get out, but he decides to at least try to fly up. In his plans, this should work, if only because fog cannot overcome a certain height. As he suspected, after a couple of minutes of flying, he comes across a dome that holds back both the fog and him inside the fog. Damian is angry that someone has encroached on his freedom and pulls out his sword. One swing of the sword is not enough, so he uses the 1,000-slash technique. His plan works and the hero successfully punches a hole in the dome. But before his eyes appears not a city but a forest with giant trees. He lands and is suddenly greeted by a mysterious voice calling him a stranger. Damian cocks his sword again, afraid that the tree has recognized him as a creature not of this world. The tree, in the same calm voice, asks him not to be afraid and tells him about his request to save this world. The hero assumes that it is about destroying zombies, but the tree sharply replies that it is the townspeople who need to be driven out. The guy understands that he is in for a long story, so he sits down on the ground and asks to find out the details. According to the tree's story, this world was quiet and calm until a stranger appeared who wanted to appropriate all the riches of the world. This man brought hundreds of his creatures here and began uncontrolled collection of the special seeds that the tree created for sale. Because of this, the plant began to pray to the god of death, begging for an army that could drive out the invaders. It was then that the tree developed the ability to turn corpses into zombies. After this, the war between humans and zombies began, until the last humans were driven out of the last existing city. But at the most decisive moment, a powerful man appeared who was an idealist and master of the art of gardening. Then everything ended with the defeat of the zombies. But the tree saw Damian and how much his skills differed from those of ordinary citizens. Therefore, the plant asks to betray the side of the inhabitants in exchange for 10 fruits of wisdom, equal in price to 10 points of divinity. The tree understands that this alone is not enough, and offers to supplement it with 3 more corpses of gods who died thousands of years ago. This offer turns out to be more tempting for the hero, but he is still in no hurry to agree. The thought of possible revenge from the Imperial Academy's management sobers him up a bit. Damian refuses and turns to leave, but the tree rushes to stop him. It promises that if he agrees to help, it will introduce the boy to the god of death himself. Such an acquaintance will allow the hero to receive the divine title of the 5th level, for which all the gods will respect him. But he is in no hurry to agree. To do this, he demands that the connection with the divine sphere be restored in order to summon creatures from there. The tree replies that this is only possible with an oath of allegiance to the god of death, and if the oath is broken, retribution will follow. Damian understands that the plant is afraid that he will act like the first alien. Without thinking, he makes an oath to the god of death. After this, the mark of the god of death flashes on his hand, but then disappears after a moment. The Tree of Wisdom, in response, begins to create a portal for the hero. Upon completion, a swarm of locusts bursts out of the portal, but does not trigger a punishment from the system and does not die. Damian also feels the energy of the divine sphere, being filled with power, and even reaches the level of a lord. The tree senses changes in him, but ignores them, reminding him of their agreement. After this, an unknown force throws the hero back out of the secret grove. He lands in the same fog-shrouded space where zombies roam everywhere. But now he is definitely not held back by the tree's trap, and so he decides to think on the way to the city about how to complete the task. Damian reaches the city at dawn, earning joyful cries from the city guards. As soon as he lands, everyone runs to greet him and hug him. The mayor even awards him the title of honorary citizen, which will give him a discount on the residents' goods. The sun rises inexorably, causing the zombies remaining outside the fog to quickly disintegrate into dust. At the end of the night, Dolan ends up in 4th place in the rankings, which makes him incredibly angry. The guy decides that it's time to resort to other methods, since he can't beat the hero in a fair fight. In just a couple of minutes, he leaves his house with a huge sword, in which money is rattling, and heads to the city. He quickly finds a hired killer, as he had heard about him beforehand, and orders him to take care of Damian. Despite their caution, one of the hero's insects was still able to follow them. Very soon he receives news from the locusts and decides that he can treat Dolan as meanly as he did. He immediately summons his army of locusts, which he kept outside the city. The insects do not attract the attention of the guards and fill the streets. A swarm of insects spreads across the lawns of city residents and begins to eat the most valuable and strong plants. Because of the small negative energy, plants also do not notice them. By the time Caroline finds out, the insects have already destroyed 1/3 of the special plants in the city. She is also interested in how he transferred his creatures here, but the hero refuses to answer. The girl is irritated by his pomposity and pulls him by the ear, still demanding an answer. But suddenly their quarrel is interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Someone insistently wants to talk to Damian. Dolan appears on the threshold of their house, having guessed that all the fuss with the locust is the hero's doing. He decides to pretend that he has no idea what the guy is talking about. Damian confidently states that he could not call his followers here, and there is no reason to do so, given the rating. Olena is only more angered by the hero's outright lie, and he promises himself to do everything so that the hero does not see tomorrow's dawn. Due to the plants being damaged by insects, all residents panicked and rushed to look for an effective poison. Unfortunately for many, traders refuse them, because all the stocks have already been taken. This drives the residents into despair, because they understand that they will not survive the night without protection from zombies. The mayor immediately takes action and asks citizens to take refuge in the church for the night, where they will be provided protection. Damian watches all this from the sidelines. Everything is going according to his plan, and the inhabitants will soon have to escape from the city. That evening, when he meets with the guards, they kindly send him to rest, since after the eclipse the zombies are not so dangerous. The hero replies that in this case he will go check the most weakly fortified places in the city. On the way to the city, he is caught by a specimen of locust and informed about the beginning of the action of Dolan and the hired killer. In order to make things easier for them, he goes away from the city and soon the two succumb to provocation. When they approach, Damian is sitting on a large rock and jokes that he has been waiting for them here for a long time. Dolan decides that the mercenary himself gave him away, but he asks him not to belittle his professionalism. The hero reminds the boy that the academy will definitely not turn a blind eye to the murder of a student by another student. Dolan replies that it is not he who will kill Damian, but a resident of the city, and orders the mercenary to attack. The slayer summons a ghostly vine and connects it to his weapon. The next moment, he teleports right in front of Damian, raising his dagger. A sharp blade passes across the hero's neck. But, unexpectedly for the killer, the blade simply breaks without causing any damage. When the killer looks closely at the boy, he discovers that his skin is covered in dragon scales, which blocked the blow. Both attackers begin to slowly retreat, confused as to how Damian could have found out about their plot. The hero replies that he will always find a way, and sends his locust people ahead. He sends insects to attack the hired killer. No matter how hard the masked man tries, he alone cannot defeat such a squad. At this time, Damian decides to deal with Dolan on his own and blocks the guy's path when he runs into the city itself. Dolan, horrified and with trembling knees, reminds them that the academy will not let students get away with killing each other. But the hero has learned a lesson from his rival's thoughts and plans to kill him not with his own hands, but with the help of zombies. Dolan decides to make a final dash towards the city, hoping to find sympathy from the residents and shelter there. But Damian's wings are faster than the guy's legs, and he grabs him by the throat and hits him on the ground a couple of times. Having lost the last shreds of dignity under the onslaught of the hero's power, Dolan begins to threaten him with revenge from his family. Damian decides to ignore his words and lifts him by the waist with one hand, like a puppy. He swings and launches the guy straight into the crowd of zombies that had already begun to approach the city after sunset. Within a few minutes, all that remains of the guy is a bare skeleton. Having finished with the annoying student, Damian takes all the valuables from the corpses of the would-be killers and decides to go hunting for zombies. After this night, it becomes obvious to all the inhabitants that without the protection of strong plants, they will simply be killed, sooner or later. For this reason, the mayor gathers the residents, including Damian, to discuss the next course of action. The mayor finds himself in a difficult situation, since it is impossible to hide in the church forever. The hero comes to his rescue, declaring that he knows what needs to be done. The guy decides to ask if they ever thought about moving to another world. This proposal gives rise to a heated debate among the town's residents. The mayor says that he learned from old archive records that the portal that could transport them was destroyed. But Damian assures them that he will find a way to restore the portal if they still agree to leave this world. The hero talks about the city of Dolan and how much safer it will be for everyone there, and the mayor agrees without further thought. Returning to the depths of the Tree of Wisdom, he tells the tree of his achievements and that they will need a portal. The tree happily replies that it will restore the portal and asks to bring all the inhabitants to this forest after sunset. The hero does so. The inhabitants, despite their fear and horror, listen to him and bring all their things with them. On her way into the forest, Jessica notices a tree of wisdom, which was the stuff of legends but which no one had ever seen. As he approaches, the mayor is incredibly relieved to see a working portal between its branches. The residents quickly move to Dolan, immensely grateful to Damian for saving them. This is where the main test of Zombie City ends. After the mystery of this place was revealed, teacher Lena rushes to call the students back to the academy. The woman congratulates everyone who passed the test and pities the 2 dead students who will be given a chance at a second life. Damian would like to feel sorry for Dolan, who was not even warned about the real death but suddenly notices him nearby. Lena meanwhile announces the first 3 places and their scores. But among them, as expected, Dolan is not. The boy decides to appeal for justice and reports that Damian cheated during the test. His accusations are supported by his friends. They all confirm that they saw locusts in Zombie City. But their tirade is interrupted by Lena. It turns out that there was no ban on summoning, and Damian simply used the method available in the system. Elena is incredibly angry that the teacher took the hero's side, and he demands a meeting with the rector about this situation. The teacher's smile hardens. Although the student has the right to talk to the rector, he certainly cannot speak to her with such disrespect. For this, she sends him to the world of Dungeon, where he will work off his punishment for a whole year. Lena glances at the other students and asks them if they have any other complaints. But the students choose to be smart and not join Dolan, and therefore answer that they have no complaints. Having settled the conflict, the teacher suggests moving on to distributing the prizes among the first places. After the end of the lesson, all the students go to their homes, but suddenly someone calls out to Damian in the hallway. It turns out that they are senior students. They appeared just in time for the hero to immediately hand them the fruits of the Tree of Wisdom. After all his work in Zombie City, he now has 12 fruits, 9 of which he decides to give to the upperclassmen. The students are impressed with his result, as they thought it would bring in about $2,000. Damian now has 9 more divinity points. Suddenly, their sweet conversation is interrupted by another senior. He was the one who lost the argument, and now he is angry about it. Sensing the growing conflict, Vincent steps between the hero and Elijah. Jenny explains the whole situation with the freshman, which resulted in an argument and Elijah losing. It's not hard for the hero to guess that the red-haired man was betting on Elena, and that's why he doesn't even show sympathy. Insulted, the freshman runs away but promises to take revenge during the general competition between the preparatory and first years. Vincent apologizes to Damian for all this fuss with the divinity points, because they won't be able to interfere with the competition. But the hero assures him that there is nothing to worry about. After all, only by competing with the strong can one develop further. But even so, the seniors ask him to come to them for help if they need it. Meanwhile, in the palace of the King of the Gods, the audience hours begin. This time, Mr. Farley came to take a bow to clarify the situation that happened in the Divine Ruins. He tells that at the place where the ritual was held, he found the corpse of a locust, and about the only person with such familiars, Damian. The King of the Gods is furious at the thought that a divine being could thwart his plans and kill 6 of his demigods. Mr. Farley is frightened by his anger and tells about the rest of the evidence that points to the student. He was finally convinced by an ore merchant who recognized Damian from a photograph and an entry in the hotel guest book. For this valuable information, the King of the Gods rewards the man with a chest of treasures and orders him to leave. He orders his men to find out whether that student took the most valuable treasure. Meanwhile, the hero returned to his home and decides to prepare a little for the next test at the academy. As a reward for first place, he was given a jade flower pot that would multiply the seeds of any plant. The hero has already figured out what skills can be used to enhance this artifact, getting the perfect weapon for his collection. Besides, he has 3 demigod corpses that can be used to create lords. This will definitely increase his combat power. But suddenly he is pulled out of his thoughts by a call from the teacher. Lena immediately reports bad news about the disturbance in Zombie City. The one who handed over this space to the academy, Olena's father, was terribly angry because of the hero's actions. Damian is afraid that he will be expelled from the academy, but the teacher is quick to reassure him. After all, he has not broken any rules. However, the man demands a rematch and challenges the hero to a duel in order to punish him and warn the other students. With this news, Damian knows he's going to stay up all night to improve his locusts as quickly as possible. The next day, all the students gather at the Imperial Academy arena to watch the battle. The seniors begin to furiously support the hero from the stands when he is transported here. The battle will be judged by teacher Lena herself. She also introduces the hero to his opponent, Teacher Cross. The man promises not to use any abilities during the fight, but to only pit his million creatures against Damian's creatures. Lena suggests not to hesitate and start the battle. The rivals will fight in the hilly area. The three are immediately transported to another space that the arena projects. The teacher asks each of them to summon creatures. Teacher Cross immediately opens a portal to his divine space, and thousands of androids emerge from there.